We walked about 50 feet into the corridor in silence to explore the next room. Realia walked in front of me and broke the silence. "Can I have my ring back?" I hesitated before asking. "What does it do?" The elf woman paused before replying. "It is a ring of sustenance. It allows the wearer to require less food and less sleep." Maevith echoed my thoughts. "That would have been useful to have when we were in the library, Eric." "How much less food and sleep?" I asked, pulling the ring into my hand. The silver ring didn't look too special. It was just a thick silver band. When I was wearing it, I could get a full night's rest in about 2 hours. I still needed to drink normally, but I only needed one small meal daily to feel full. She sounded truthful, but I could never be certain. "Why would I return it to you if it is so useful?" I asked doubtfully, turning it over in my hand. "How about I trade you the ring for the ranger's cloak?" she suggested cautiously. I considered the offer. Technically, both artifacts were mine. Being cynical, I thought maybe she wanted the cloak to help her escape. Maevith added to the conversation. "I made Eric a beautiful cloak from a bull manticore's leather wing. I took the hint from the Goliath. He wanted me to make the exchange to build trust and to affirm that I would treasure his cloak." "How does the ring work?" I asked, intrigued. Realia turned her head. Seeing I was holding the ring, she said, "You put it on and channel ether into it. It takes about a week to attune to a new wearer. Over the week, you will need less and less sleep and feel the need to eat less." The ring would only fit on my pinky finger. As I was about to put it on, she laughed. "Never worn a dungeon ring before?" I did not appreciate the mirth in her tone or how she looked down on my ignorance. I controlled a scathing retort and asked calmly, "No, how do you wear a ring?" The Griffin Rider stopped laughing. "Just slide it on the finger you want. Trickle ether into it. It may take a while to reform, but it will. Only dungeon-created rings will resise." She was right. The ring slid slowly onto my ring finger. I just hoped this ring was not cursed, but I was less worried since I had Maevith take it from her while it was still in her hand. "Do you know how to figure out what a ring can do?" Maevith, on a quest to win her trust, informed her. "We found a ring in a dungeon chest." I was not upset with him pandering to the elf or revealing what we found. I was having some trouble believing she was sincere, and not just acting while waiting for an opportunity. Realia considered the question before speaking. "There are 3 ways that I know. One is a revelation scroll. Adventurers' guild halls have them. The other is finding a mage who can cast a divination spell. The last is by heating it up and using a magnifying glass to study the intricate runes on the ring that reveal themselves in the heat of a fire. But you need someone skilled in reading the runic markings of dungeons." I nodded, remembering that Castile had said something similar, and I thought I had a way to cheat. We approached the end of the hallway and Realia was walking next to Maevith. They stopped at the entrance, and I halted behind them. "Not a safe room," I said, disappointed as I took in the next room. It was another large chamber. Boulders and small trees dotted the expansive space. A small body of water cut through the room like a wide stream, flowing slowly, as indicated by the visible ripples. "Okay, dungeon expert, what are we facing?" I asked Realia. Realia leaned forward to take in the room. "This is a large room, bigger than anything I have ever seen in a dungeon," she continued, a little more uncertainty in her voice. "Usually, you know what to expect in a room based on others who came before you." I asked another question. "What about the room reset times?" "Always a day based on the sun, sometimes longer if the dungeon is low on ether from the ley lines feeding it. Usually, a member of the dungeon team carries an hourglass," she said, looking back at me dubiously. "You cannot repeatedly delve into a dungeon, or you will exhaust it," she replied. I thought she was leaning too far in, so I grabbed her shoulder to stop her and pull her back. She tensed and spun quickly to face me, her large blue-green eyes fierce. I was ready with an air shield, but she did not attack. I explained, "I thought you were getting too close to the entrance of the room. I did not want you trapped inside." She huffed and exhaled as she relaxed. "Only the final room or last room on a floor will do that," she said, rubbing her shoulder. I had unintentionally grabbed the shoulder Maevith had bandaged. I debated whether to apologize or not. "I forgot your shoulder was injured, or I wouldn't have grabbed it so hard," I said with as much sincerity as I could muster. My eyes were locked on hers as she determined whether I was being genuine. Maveth drew our attention to the room. I see some movement. I think it is a Gnoll. We both focused on the far side of the room, and Raelia confirmed. It is a Gnoll. I can see 3, but there are probably more. The bipedal hyena beasts were supposedly fast, and a huge nuisance to the Empire. I recalled something. Don't elves and Gnolls have an enmity? Are we going to need to restrain you from rushing in? Raelia tersely noted. I have no love for Gnolls, but wood elves attack Gnolls on sight. I am a high elf. I am a high, she finished tersely as if that explained everything. High elf indeed. You see yourself as above all others, then, I retorted sharply in a poor attempt to tease the elf. That is not, she started to reply tersely, but changed her mind, seeing I was goading her. Just above some. Her eyes narrowed on me. One of the Gnolls finally spotted us and ran at us on all fours before standing before the passage. It was nude and definitely a male as it sniffed the air. It then cackled loudly, drawing the attention of the others. A hive of activity ensued, and 7 other Gnolls raced across the cavern, all naked and all males. They soon cackled as a group, which was abrasive to my ears, especially with their proximity. We backed away from the entrance to escape the hideous cacophony they made. The Griffin Rider spoke first. They are feral Gnolls. I did not see any armor or weapons. They will attack with claws and bites. What is the difference between feral and regular Gnolls? I asked, thinking they were like feral dogs compared to domesticated ones. Raelia eyed me. Gnolls are intelligent and form small nomadic tribes in the forests. They have a society, in a manner of speaking. Those, she pointed back at the room, are just beasts. I do not think they will be coordinated when they fight. I looked at Maveth. Numbers were the worst thing for us to encounter, as I could only kill one of the creatures instantly. This was why we had recruited the elf woman, Maveth thought for a moment. I can take 3, I think. I could take 2 if I had my weapons, Raelia offered. I ignored her for a moment to think. 8 opponents were a lot, and they were all man-sized and fast. The terrain was not favorable either, allowing them to surround us. I turned to Raelia. What about your fireball? Do you have any other spells? Raelia's face twisted slightly as she probably remembered I had used her own fireball against her at the aqueduct. You cannot charge a spell outside of a dungeon room. The aether in the spell form will break apart as you pass the entrance. I can cast a decent fireball if given time after entering the room. What about your other spells? I pressed. She was being cagey and did not answer. I pulled out the assessment table. Use it, I commanded. She had defiance in her eyes, but moved to the tablet reader and placed her small hands on it. I scanned her attributes quickly, but was more focused on her magical affinities. Strength 19 out of 38, Intellect 31 out of 40, Either Pool 27 out of 35, Power 22 out of 44, Reasoning 23 out of 35, Channeling 31 out of 33, Quickness 50 out of 76, Perception 41 out of 65, Aether Shaping 48 out of 52, Dexterity 49 out of 65, Insight 19 out of 43, Either Tolerance 28 out of 37, Endurance 28 out of 42, Resilience 28 out of 58, Either Resistance 29 out of 40, Constitution 18 out of 29, Empathy 52 out of 64, Prime Affinity Fire, Coordination 48 out of 69, Fortitude 24, 36. I felt slightly jealous of her ether shaping and dexterity, which gave her the ability to cast actual spells. I scanned over to her affinities. Nothing impressive. What are your spell forms for fire and air? And do you have any other spells? I asked again. Raelia reluctantly spoke. For fire, I have thermostasis. It is cold in the skies and keeps the air around my body comfortable. My air spell form eliminates wind shear when I am riding. She stopped talking, and I remembered we had killed her griffin. And spells. I asked for a 3rd time. The elf woman finally conceded to tell me. Fireball, gust of wind, control flame. What does control flame do? I questioned her. With some pride, she said, I can influence magical and non-magical fire. It is not immensely powerful, but it helps me enhance and direct my fireball. I put the tablet reader away as Maveth was trying to decipher the elf's numbers. We did not have time for this right now. Okay, this is the plan. We wait until the Gnolls return to the room's other side. Maveth and Raelia will enter first. Raelia will fireball the tightest group she can get, and then we will engage the leftovers. I need a weapon. Raelia reminded me brusquely. Maveth arched an eyebrow at me. I think he was becoming amused by our interactions. He was also curious about what I was going to do. I produced the long dagger that belonged to her non-magical blade. I handed it to her, and I think she realized she was not getting her runic legacy weapon back. Stay out of the fighting after the fireball. Maveth and I will clean them up. She sheathed the blade on her belt, still possessing the scabbard. It took the Gnolls almost an hour before they wandered from the entrance. We moved into the room together, and Raelia created her fireball. The tight ball emitted a heat I could feel even standing behind her as she added increasingly more aether to grow its power. Only 3 savage Gnolls charged us in a lead group, and Raelia released her searing ball at them. It exploded in a flash among the 3 Gnolls. A dry wave of heat reached us from 40 feet away, and the 3 clustered Gnolls were blown away like ragdolls. Maveth thundered forward, and the other 5 Gnolls only paused for breath as the heat wave hit them. I sprinted ahead with Maveth, a little reluctant to have the elf at my back. "Take the one on the far right, Maveth," I yelled. I did not want either of us to get flanked, so I targeted the one farthest to the left. My black blade flashed out, removing the paw of my target, and as it went into shock, I rotated and pivoted into an arcing swing to take the stunned Gnoll in the back. My blade bit deep, severing the spine above the hips. I extracted my blade as the Gnoll collapsed and faced the next one, blocking a claw attack with my battered shield. Using my superior reach, I stabbed the unprotected chest of the Gnoll, piercing its heart as its jaws tried to snap over my shield, a spray of saliva hitting my exposed face. I twisted the blade, destroying its heart, then extracted it and turned to take in the scene. Maveth had both his Gnolls handled, one with a crushed skull and the other with a crushed chest. The 8th Gnoll was sprinting at Raelia, who had a defensive stance, ready to receive the charge. It was just within range of my dimensional space. I removed its head, and it collapsed in front of the stunned elf, its heart pumping spurts of blood at her from the stump. I appreciated seeing her stunned look, as her eyes went from the headless Gnoll to me, and back numerous times. I moved to end the paralyzed and burned Gnolls, which sounded like wounded dogs, and Maveth joined me. Soon, all 8 Gnolls were dead, and the reward chest appeared by the stream. I cleaned my blade on some leaves as Raelia was still staring at the headless Gnoll in front of her. I think she was piecing together that I could have killed her just as easily the first time we met her the second time. While Raelia was still focused on the headless Gnoll, I went and cracked open the chest. Over 30 large pieces of silver spilled out, and buried underneath the coins was a heavy silver chain adorned with a large sapphire. It was an ornate piece of jewelry, etched with images of birds and fairies along the chain, with 2 fairies holding the gem. The azure gem was shaped like a flattened egg, and its cut made it appear as though flowing water was trapped inside when light shone through it. It was clearly evident that it was an artifact. I scooped up all the coins and the necklace, placing them in the manticore pouch Maveth had made for me while I waited for enough of my ether to recover to bring out the collector. Maveth was dragging the bodies of the Gnolls away from the water source. I searched the chamber, noting that the stream running through it was the most interesting feature. It emerged from one wall and exited through a small whirlpool at the other end. There were no fish, which was disappointing since I had hoped to harvest another assortment of essences. The bushes showed no signs of fruit either. Confused, I yelled across the room at Maveth. "What do you think the Gnolls were eating?" Every room had contained something the dangerous monsters could survive on. Maveth walked around a bit and replied, "Rats or large moles. There are some small bone fragments in the scat over here." He was stirring it with a stick. Raelia had recovered her wits. Dungeons do that to minimize the ether required to maintain the creatures populating their rooms. There should be something in here for the rats to eat as well, probably one of the plants. We continued searching, finding a few holes in the soil. Maveth uprooted one of the bushes, revealing large, dark, bulbous tubers hanging off the roots. "Is that a potato?" I asked, suddenly excited. Maveth washed one off in the stream and cut it in half. The dark purple exterior revealed brilliant purple flesh streaked with white. Maveth looked confused. I've never seen a purple potato before. Maybe it's poisonous. Raelia walked over, took it from the Goliath and sniffed it. This is a vedplot potato. They are a delicacy with a nutty taste. You boil them, mash them with browned butter, form them into small discs, and fry them in oil or fat. Did the elf just describe tater tots? Maveth showed interest and looked at the bushes. Eric, how many potatoes can you store? I pointed at Raelia, indicating her size. I just freed up some space. About that much volume. Raelia did not appreciate my joke and gave me a hard stare. I took out the collector and approached the line of gnolls that Maveth had piled together. The elf followed, intrigued by the collector. Kneeling over the first corpse, I placed the collector down, and without looking at her, asked, "Never seen a collector in action before?" "Of course I have," she replied, offended at my remark. "They are just rare to see outside the Adventurers Guild, since they are extremely rare to find in dungeons and how to artifice them has been lost." "I thought the Tellian artificers made them," I said as the blue smoke was pulled from the body, forming a dark yellow major essence of dexterity. Raelia inhaled deeply in shock at the density of the smoke. She gawked at the essence. "A major essence from just a gnoll," she whispered. I sounded a little smug, knowing something she did not. "The dungeon has not been disturbed for centuries. Creatures here are more likely to yield essences, and larger ones at that." She watched in disbelief as every gnoll yielded the same dark yellow essence of dexterity. I placed each one in the bag as I went. After I finished with the last one, I tossed it to her, and she nimbly caught it. Only one of the gnolls was killed by the fireball. She quickly pieced together what I meant. Angrily, she spat. "What? How is that fair? You told me not to help after the fireball, and the two others caught in the blast could not even move when you executed them. Was I teasing her too much?" "You're complaining?" I asked seriously. I could see Maveth walking over quickly to intervene after the Griffin Rider yelled at me. The elf stormed away like a petulant child. Maveth's hands were dirty from harvesting the potatoes, and his deep voice rumbled in concern. "We need her help, Eric. She was extremely helpful in the fight, taking 3 gnolls out of action before it started." "Sorry, Maveth. I shouldn't tease her like that." I took 2 of the spheres from the manticore pouch and handed them to Maveth. "You can give these to her. Tell her you convinced me she deserved them." "I told you the pouch would be useful," Maveth said, grinning. Was Maveth making a joke about the pouch holding the spheres? "Yes, it is very nice. I'm still a little squeamish when I think about what it used to hold," I said to my friend. Maveth studied the black pouch, but did not seem to understand my discomfort. Maveth approached Raelia, who was trying to clean herself near the stream's drain. He gave her the 2 essences. She looked at me for a second before turning her back to me. I consumed one of the dark yellow essences, feeling a tingly sensation spread, focusing on my fingers and toes before dissipating. Dexterity should improve my fine motor control. I started helping Maveth harvest the potatoes. When he uprooted a large mole from one of the plants, I yelled at him to catch it, but it quickly burrowed into the soft soil. So there were moles, not rats. With my ether recovered, I sent the pouch to my space and retrieved the small mirror from my barber's bag. I walked over to Raelia, and she looked up at me, curious. At the moment she had no anger in her eyes after Maveth had given her the 2 essences. I offered her the mirror, and she was shocked and embarrassed by her appearance. She immediately began scrubbing her face. I left her, amused that she was concerned about looking good in a dungeon. Who did she need to impress? Maveth and I had a huge stack of dark purple potatoes on the tarp. Raelia, now looking much better after cleaning up, offered to wash them in the stream. "Great, Raelia. I'm going to clean up myself on the other side of the chamber." I crossed the room, planning to bathe out of her sight. "Maveth, you should bathe too. We don't get many opportunities in here." Maveth nodded and joined me. As we stripped, I took the opportunity to hand Maveth 2 of the lesser healing potions Raelia had. 2 lesser healing potions, Maveth, in case you need them during a fight. Let me know when you need more essences as well. Maveth's deep voice was filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Eric. I have been taking 1 essence every day like you told me to. I think they are working. I feel faster already." I arched my left eyebrow at him because I knew that even if he had taken all 38 lesser essences, He might have only raised his quickness attribute by 1 point. It would not have affected his quickness potential at all. He was fortifying the attribute, and training it would be easier, making it less likely to decrease over time. It was strange how filthy you could get inside a dungeon in just a few days. The stream had a sandy bottom and was only knee-deep but cool and refreshing. I had no soap left, so I used an abrasive wool sock as a washcloth and gave the other to Mavith. "You can keep that sock," I told the Goliath after watching him use it to wash every body part. "Are you sure?" Mavith asked. He looked up and muttered, "I think Rurelia's spying on us." I turned and saw a brief flash of movement 60 feet away. Maybe she was planning to roast us with a fireball while we bathed, I chuckled. But suddenly, unpleasant images of being burned like the Gnolls filled my mind. Mavith's face scrunched. "You should not antagonize her so much. We need her, and I like her." Looking at Mavith, I could not see the nearly 8-foot Goliath being intimate with the elf, who barely stood over 5 feet tall. I erased all thoughts of it. "I'm just testing her, Mavith. We need to find out if she can control herself and if she's likely to turn on us." Things were quiet for a while, and Mavith laid out to dry on a boulder while I floated in the water. Soaking in the cool water felt amazing. "I'm done!" Raelia yelled from the other side a few minutes later. "How much time do we have left, Mavith?" I asked the Goliath, who was putting on his damp clothes to join Raelia. Mavith considered. "We have been in this room for less than 8 hours, okay?" I moved to the shore and pulled out several items for Mavith to cook with. "I'm going to enjoy the water for a bit, but you two can start a meal." Mavith nodded and looked at everything, considering. "If we are going to fry the potatoes, I need some fattier bear meat." I searched my space and added some belly meat to the mix. Mavith nodded and took everything across the room. I soon heard the two of them talking softly on the other side of the chamber. I dozed off in the water, even though I had not meant to. "Eric, the food is ready." Mavith's deep voice called above me. He whispered, "She tried really hard to cook. Say you like it." "What?" I asked, leaving the water. "Are you sure she didn't poison it?" Mavith's face scrunched in displeasure. "She is eating the food as well? It is just a bit salty," Mavith confided. I dressed and sent my armor to my space for now. We had time before our next encounter, and the freedom of movement was welcome. They had set up a nice little camp, and Raelia had stacked the cleaned potatoes neatly. The dark purple made it look more like a pile of rocks. I just hoped they tasted better than rocks. Dinner consisted of grilled bear meat and purple hamburger-sized potato patties. Raelia looked expectantly at me as I took 2 patties and sandwiched some meat between them. The meal had a good crunch to it, and it was flavorful, but as Mavith had warned, it was quite salty. I summoned a canteen and took a long pull of water. I was honest with her. The texture and flavor are good. "Just a little too much salt for my delicate palate," she reddened, and Mavith shot me an unhappy look. Raelia softly said, "I thought the salt was flour by mistake." "An honest mistake," I consoled her, rather than teasing her further. I would not say my own cooking skills were spectacular. I needed the entire canteen to wash the meal down. Whether my new sustenance ring was working or my body simply did not need a second portion, I opted for a raw apple to cleanse my mouth instead. Mavith started cleaning the pots in the nearby stream, leaving Raelia and me facing each other. I decided to put her mind at ease. "If we encounter anyone from my mage company, I'll put you back in my dimensional space." Panic flashed across her face, and she tensed, looking like a frightened rabbit ready to bolt. "Is it that bad in there?" I asked, genuinely concerned. Raelia paused, slowly calming down. "The 3 do not remember. No time passed for me. However, I was unconscious the second time." There was a brief silence while Mavith clicked the pots he was cleaning in the background. "It's the only way out for you. I promise to release you when it's safe outside. My word is good." I could see the doubt in her eyes. "And on the bright side, if someone kills me, everything in my dimensional space will be tossed out, freeing you anyway." "Really? I do not know how space magic works. It is an extremely rare gift. Did you use space or void magic to remove the Gnoll's head?" I sensed she was trying to dig for information. She was not particularly good at it, or maybe her accented Latin revealed her interest. "I don't know any void magic. and produced the head of the Gnoll at her feet, hiding a grin, and got the reaction I wanted as she jumped up. It was a bit childish, but it proved to Realia that I had not used void magic to kill the Gnoll. The Gnoll blinked, its face sneering, unaware it did not have a body, but with just a few heartbeats, it stilled. Realia cursed me. Why would you do that without warning? Mivith looked disappointed as well. How was I the bad guy here? Realia stared morbidly at the head, fascinated, contemplation written on her elven features. My guess was that she thought she could be next. I broke the awkwardness brought on by my own doing. Let's check out the next room. I sent all the potatoes to storage, and Raelia's eyes bulged as they disappeared. If the ring of sustenance worked as advertised, this could mean years of potential food stores for me. I equipped my armor again, and soon the three of us were walking down the only other exit from the room. It took a few minutes before we reached a familiar-looking room with tall, elevated stone shelves and a small fountain in the center. It was almost identical to the last safe room we had found. I had everyone wait 5 minutes before entering first. Raelia went straight to the faded elven writing on the wall. "This is good," I said, looking around. "We can spend a day here getting some sleep without worrying about getting attacked." Raelia turned to me. It is an old script, but I had no difficulty reading it. I was going to tell her I could read it too, but I let it slide as my elven reading level was probably that of a 6-year-old. It says the next room contains gnolls, followed by phase spiders, and then a blizzard lizard room. It also mentions that the stairs to the 3rd level are 2 chambers beyond. I looked up, confused. Wait, it says it's called a blizzard lizard? No, but I thought that is what we were calling it, she said, a humorous smirk on her face. Mavith nodded, confirming the name. Okay, fine. Can I use the thermal stone to heat the magical rings enough for the spell forms to show up? I asked the Griffin Rider. She thought about it. I think so. But even if not, it will not damage the ring. What about these? I pulled out the silver ring from the Frost Salamander's chest, along with the gold ring I found by the ruined wagons, the large pink stone ring, and a large sapphire necklace. Raelia's eyes widened, and her jaw dropped as I casually laid them out. She might have recognized one of the artifacts. She looked from me to the items repeatedly, disbelief etched on her face. I calmly asked, "Do you know what any of these things are?" Raelia tentatively picked up the large sapphire necklace. "No, I do not know what any of these items do, but they are all clearly artifacts." She turned the necklace in her hand, studying the fairies and birds on the chain, shaking her head in disbelief. "This jewel is perfect. It must be worth—" She did not voice her opinion, and instead put it down to pick up the large pink stone ring. She examined the ring's artwork, muttering, "It is beautiful." She stepped back, clearly tempted. "Do you have any other artifacts?" I raised an eyebrow, signaling that I was not going to share my secrets. "No, we've just picked these up in the rooms we have cleared." I picked up the sapphire necklace and the pink stone ring. From my experience, dungeons do not work that way, even old ones. Maybe 1 in 5 rooms will have an artifact, and 1 in 3 creatures will yield an essence. Her tone was accusatory, as if I were hiding something from her. "Every gnoll gave you a major essence," she stated flatly. I had already explained that the dungeon had not been delved into for centuries, and I was not going to tell her that my collector was special. I shrugged, ignoring her plea for an explanation. "If you don't know what they do, I'll put them away." Both items vanished, leaving just the rings. Raelia looked longingly at my empty hands. "I guessed all women, regardless of their race, liked jewelry. Can you get the thermal stone?" I had let her carry it in her backpack. I placed both rings on the stone and channeled aether into it. As the stone glowed red, tiny symbols formed on the inside of the rings. I had no chance of reading them, but I hoped my trick would work. I focused on one ring at a time, turning the stone with a knife 360 degrees while I concentrated. She distracted me, and I turned the stone again, studying each ring before answering her. No, I was just looking. I knocked the rings off the stone to cool. Raelia immediately picked both of them up before I could stop her. She said haughtily, "Enchanted rings do not get hot in fire. They are extremely difficult to destroy. You would need to toss them into a volcano at a ley-line nexus to melt them down, or perhaps have an ancient dragon melt them with its fire breath." She was too smug with her knowledge. I held out my hand, and she huffed, dropping the rings into it. "Mavith, can you keep an eye on me while I sleep for a bit?" I asked the Goliath, who was setting up his bed. Raelia scoffed. "We are in a safe room. Nothing can attack you in here." Her voice trailed off at the end, realizing I wanted to be protected from her. Mavith moderated. "I understand, Eric. We will work on preparing a meal for when you wake. We will work on preparing a meal for when you wake." I then brought out all the ingredients he wanted, and he set up with Raelia on the far side of the room. I produced the weasel pelt and my griffin down pillow to get comfortable. I lay down with the dreamscape amulet hidden from Raelia's sight. Entering the dreamscape, I spent a good amount of time playing a game of therapeutic fetch with Oscar. I had to ignore Constantine and the others as I focused on creating the rings, 1 silver and 1 gold. I started with the silver ring from the frost salamander, enlarging it to 10 feet across so I could stand in the middle of it. It did not even need to be heated for the spell forms to pop up in glowing blue script. I could not believe it had actually worked. My subconscious had been able to read the details in the real world and replicate them here. The dreamscape amulet was much more powerful than I had originally thought. I had gotten the idea since it seemed to recreate books from Earth in perfect detail, which I had read a long time ago. Now the challenge was figuring out what the rings did based on the books Castile left behind. 3 hours later, I was still working on the silver ring, as best as I could decipher from some of the spell forms that matched in the ring with Castile's books. The ring granted the wearer resistance to cold. How much resistance I could not determine. Perhaps the ring was a reward for defeating the blizzard lizard, so you would be immune to its cold breath the next time you fought it. This would be useful, especially if we had to leave the dungeon and traverse the ruins in the snow. Should we risk trying to obtain another one? I repeated the process with the gold ring next. I found this ring near the abandoned merchant wagons when we took the old trade road after heavy rains had washed the barge transport away. The runes here were much more complex. After hours of studying and comparing, the best I could figure out was that the ring allowed the wearer to influence another person's disposition positively. How powerful it was, I did not know. It made sense that a trader would wear such a ring. I exited the dreamscape and was welcomed by the smell of roasted meat. I had gotten lost in my work and had not tracked how long I had slept. Mavith, how long was I asleep? Mavith looked over, and I could see the two had been playing checkers. 6 hours, maybe a little more. Raelia huffed and announced loudly, "Mavith, can you watch me while I sleep and make sure I am not molested?" She went into the stone alcove across from mine to get some sleep. I ignored the upset elf and went to get some food. It was a beef stew with potatoes, onions, and bear meat. It was really good, but after a large bowl, I found myself full. Raelia lay on her side with her back to us, and I assumed she was sleeping. "Mavith, this ring will keep you warm in the cold." Raelia twitched, and I assumed she was not actually sleeping. "See if it will reside to your finger." Mavith took the ring and was amazed. "It is working. The ring is getting larger." Raelia pretended to stretch and rolled over, but her eyes appeared to be closed. It took Mavith nearly 10 minutes to slide the ring onto his finger. It thinned out a little, conserving mass, but eventually he said, "I can feel it working. The air around me feels slightly warmer. After being trapped in the freezing city for so long, I had not noticed, but the dungeon corridors and rooms were on the cooler side." Raelia's eyes opened slowly, and with a hint of accusation in her voice, she spoke. "I thought you said you could not read the spell forms on the ring. And I thought you were sleeping?" We stared at each other for a moment before the elf rolled over, putting her back to us again, and tried to sleep. "Mavith, I'm going to scout the next room. Will you be safe waiting here with the elf?" I asked half seriously. The elf pulled her bedroll tight around herself, but did not respond to my jest. Mavith was fingering the silver ring and looked up at me, then at the elf. "I think I will be fine. Can I have the rest of the stew?" I nodded, and he eagerly grabbed the pot to finish it off. I walked down the corridor cautiously and arrived at a T intersection. I went right, and the corridor curved for a good long while. Finally, I arrived at another room. It was not large, maybe 60 feet across. A hilly range of dark gray and black stone made up the floor, and the room had a twilight feel to it, with less light than usual light coming from the ceiling. I remained vigilant, but did not see movement. I decided not to risk entering. It was a long walk back to the intersection and the other corridor. I hoped we could find Castile soon, as I wanted to avoid spending eternity in the shimmering labyrinth. The other corridor was much shorter, leading to a room with a hilly meadow covered in grass and small flowers maybe 70 feet across. A fat rabbit stared at me as I approached the room. As I got closer, the rabbit darted into a burrow, and a massive bear appeared from over the mound, furiously digging in the soil, trying to reach the rabbit. The dark gray coat of the bear shifted with muscle as it dug, but it was not as large as the fire bear's. Taking the chance that it was the only creature in the room, I stepped in and removed its chest cavity while its back was turned to me. I paused just inside the room, listening for other creatures. The fat rabbit popped up on the hill to see what was happening. Its ears perked up in attention. It quickly ducked into another burrow. I moved farther into the room and spotted the stone chest, which made me relax. I was about to step toward it, but paused. Would the dungeon trick me with a reward chest to make me lower my guard? I cautiously entered the room and noticed no fewer than 3 rabbits poking their heads up. I shattered the stone chest and took out 8 silver coins, a potion of greater healing, and a potion of stamina. So far, every bear I had killed had rewarded me with a greater healing potion in this dungeon. Was this a coincidence, or would this continue? A greater dungeon healing potion was valuable. An alchemist's major healing potion was worth 50 gold but had a shelf life. Dungeon potions had no such limitation from what I had been told. I thought it might be time to try milking the room for this healing potion, since the safe room was just a 10-minute walk away. I suspected this was a stone bear. The bear's hide was coarse and difficult to cut. I harvested some meat with an elven dagger claimed was from the armory. It was not Raelia's, as I had told her I would not use it. I waited for enough aether to retrieve the collector, stacking up the best cuts as I went. I had learned a lot about harvesting game from Mavavith, and I thought he would be proud of how much I had improved. I was not surprised when I harvested an Apex Strength Essence. I was slightly disappointed, though, as the Apex Essence probably meant no one from the company had reached this room yet. The rabbits watched me from a safe distance the entire time, their instincts telling them I was the new apex predator. As I walked through the smaller chamber, I saw only grass, clovers, and small wild flowers for the rabbit's diet. I considered exploring further, but realized I had already been gone for almost 4 hours, by my estimation. So I stored everything in my dimensional space and returned to the safe room. Maveth looked up as I returned and told Raelia. Told you he was okay. Eric can take care of himself, Raelia replied quickly. I was not worried. I was just asking if we should check on him. I ignored the exchange and told them what I found. The corridor forked. There's a simple meadow room with a stone bear. I produced 50 pounds of bear meat next to Raelia's bed. There are some quick rabbits in the room, but I couldn't catch any of them. Maybe we can get some with a bow. I did not enter the room at the end of the other fork. It had uneven rock terrain, and I didn't see any threats, so it could be an ambush predator. You killed a stone bear by yourself, Raelia said, astonished, then added, Of course you did. As if it were not a big deal. Then, irritated, she moved her bedding to ensure the blood from the meat did not reach it. Maveth looked disappointed. Is this all you harvested? I added the kidneys and liver to the pile, and he cheered up. Not that I would be eating either. Next, I handed Maveth the Apex Strength Essence. It's a strength essence, Maveth. Take it next. We're going to clear the Gnoll room again after the dungeon restocks it. Raelia's eyes watched the essence jealously as it passed from my hand to Maveth's, and then directly into his mouth. Why are we fighting the Gnolls again? Her tone was challenging. Because I said so, I said, sitting down, relaxing near my bed. Maveth shot me a look to be nicer, so I added, partly for the essences, but mostly because of the potatoes and the water from the stream. That explanation seemed to placate the Griffin Rider. Maveth, I got 2 potions as well, a greater healing potion and a stamina potion. Keep them accessible, and you can give the elf one of the lesser healing potions. Maveth already gave me back one of my healing potions. A greater dungeon healing potion? Raelia inquired, suddenly highly interested and moving closer. I frowned at Maveth, but I suppose it was his right to give the lesser healing potion to the elf. I just wished he had told me. Yes, So far, the reward chests in this dungeon for bears seem to give a greater healing potion every time. I thought for a minute. This was the 5th time I had killed a dungeon bear, and the reward chest had a greater healing potion each time. You have 5 greater dungeon healing potions. They are worth 500 gold each, Relia exclaimed. No, that's the only one left. Mavith got one, Constantine got one, and you got 2, I said, doing the math. You gave me 2 greater healing potions, she exclaimed in shock. Yeah, you looked like a dragon's chew toy, and I only wanted to give you one, but Mavith insisted you needed another to survive, I replied. If Mavith was interested in the elf, the least I could do was make him look good. Relia was quiet for a moment before she whispered, Thank you. But I did not know if she was directing it at me or the Goliath. We returned to the Gnoll chamber a half-day later to find the 8 Gnolls restored. Relia was able to take out 6 in a single fireball, which made the room extremely easy. It was time to start squeezing the bears and Gnolls for essences and loot. I looked at the pile of essences in my hand from the Gnolls. The essences had been reduced to 6 lesser essences and 2 major essences. Relia still could not believe that every Gnoll yielded an essence. How is every Gnoll still producing essences? She asked for the 3rd or 4th time. I shrugged, but it was clear she was suspicious of me, or perhaps even the collector itself. Like I said, the dungeon has been undisturbed for a long time. Perhaps that has something to do with it, but I'm no dungeon expert. Here, I handed her the 2 major essences and 2 minor essences. Her eyes bulged, but she took them gratefully. I do not think she had taken many essences in her lifetime. I gave her 4 because she had been responsible for 6 of the Gnolls this time. Don't get used to it. Your contribution to the fight determines what I give you. I had been slightly reluctant to give her the 4 essences, but she had done most of the work this time, so I recognized her efforts. The main reason for clearing the room was harvesting the Veitlot potatoes. Not only did the potatoes taste good, but we also needed variety in our diets, not so much for me, as I could feel the ring of sustenance reducing my caloric needs every day. We worked as a team to process them as quickly as possible. The tubers appeared smaller but fresher, and they started to stack up. When we finished, I sent them to storage. Relia stood, announcing, I am filthy. I am going to bathe. Do not spy on me. Do not spy on me. She eyed me before she walked off, but I had no intention of spying on her. Too bad we didn't catch any of the moles. I was curious what type of essence they might yield, I said conversationally to Mavith, who was cooking. He seemed distracted while preparing dinner and did not respond, so I asked, How do you think the Gnolls caught them? Probably dug with their claws. Mavith intoned, disinterested. We are out of onions and garlic, he stated morosely. To get back to the cockatrice room, we had to descend, and I was reluctant to do so. I don't think we'll be going back to that room. It would take us in the wrong direction. We need to find Castile. Maybe we'll find another chamber that has onions, I said optimistically. Not that I was a dungeon expert. It felt odd talking about the culinary shortcomings of a dungeon. Relia returned. Her wet, dark hair matted to her very damp clothes, leaving little to the imagination. She carried her leather armor, which had puncture marks, and dropped it carelessly on the ground. She focused eagerly on the food Mavith was preparing, and I wondered how someone so small could eat so much. Relia looked up briefly but did not stare, and I averted my eyes when I realized that I had been staring. Are we going to kill the stone bear next? She asked, stretching her arms over her head. I think she realized I was staring earlier and was trying to draw my attention back to her. However, I had a stronger will than that. Yes, we will kill the bear. Yes, we will kill the bear. If it yields a greater healing potion, we'll clear that room 2 more times before moving on. I moved to shatter the stone chest. I had left to see if Relia would break it without asking. She had not even mentioned it. The usual silver coins were inside, but there was no large sapphire on a silver chain this time. Instead, a modest brooch with hundreds of tiny red and clear stones in the form of a bird spreading its wings. I brought it back to the group and showed it to them. Mavith nodded appreciatively, but Relia showed shock and longing for the brooch. Do you know what power this artifact has? Relia made eye contact with me, her deep blue-green eyes studying me. They were actually very lovely if I was not worried about getting stabbed by her at the first opportunity. Not all items found in a dungeon are artifacts, Legionnaire. I did not break eye contact with her, and she finally broke down and explained to demonstrate her superior knowledge. I know it. It was once the crest of Kalora's ruling family. Now it is a symbol of sedition and hubris to elves. She took a deep breath. But yes, it is an artifact, though no elf would ever wear it openly. There is a reward for turning them into Esenhem to be destroyed. I turned the pretty piece of jewelry in my hand. But what does it do? I do not know. Some type of protection, I think, or maybe awareness. I have seen it before on an exiled descendant of Kalora's king. She thought for a moment. But it does not make sense for it to appear in a dungeon, unless it's true that a dungeon can recreate the items it absorbs. Maveth had been listening and speculated. Maybe the elves of the city sought shelter in the dungeon when the Legion besieged the city. They were probably trapped and died down here. I nodded in agreement. That would explain the ranger's cloak if Kalora's crafters produced it. I made the brooch disappear, and Raelia's eyes fell in disappointment. I thought maybe the brooch had given the wearer some influence over the elves. Or, more likely, Raelia just liked jewelry. The stone bear room should be ready for us. I stood and led the two to the chamber with the bear. The bear was back, and I quickly dispatched it, while Mavavith went right into processing it. If I had a bow, I could get the rabbits, Raelia noted, as the bunnies watched Maveth from a distance. I have a few bows but no arrows, I stated absently. She just gawked for a minute, clearly wondering what else I might have secreted away before heading off to look at the small flowers. I was left alone to open the chest, and was relieved to find silver coins and 2 potions, one each for healing and stamina. If we did meet with the company again, I was sure these healing potions would be sorely needed. Raelia had a bouquet of small yellow and white flowers and was excited. These are sundrops and sugarweed. She used the elven names for the flowers, and I had to interpret her words before I understood. Are they good for anything? I was not familiar with either flower, but there might be a reference in the elven books in the library. Those sugarweed flowers can be dried and used as a sweetener in baking. They only bloom at the height of summer, but once dry, they last a long time. The sundrops, she indicated the yellow flowers, are found only in early spring and are used in alchemy. I am not familiar with their uses, though I was told to pick them if I ever found them. You can pack out what you want. We get enough sweetness from the berries and apples. I want to keep my storage for bear meat and potatoes. Her face fell at my dismissal, but I was not going to add things to my space that we could not use. It was already getting crowded in there, and designating a space for killing creatures would become a problem if I filled it up. Maybe it was time to do some spring cleaning. I left the disappointed elf to cook while Maveth expertly processed the bear. We returned to the safe room and repeated the Gnoll room after a day had passed. The Gnolls all yielded only minor essences, and I gave 4 to Maveth and 4 to the Griffin Rider. The reward chest contained silver coins and a pair of simple silver earrings shaped like leaves. I had a gut feeling that the jewelry was not an artifact. When I channeled into it, it did not take my either, and it felt like no spell forms were buried in the metal workings. It was still an incredibly detailed piece of art. I never let Raelia see it, and she did not ask what was in the chest. After we harvested the potatoes, I announced, "This will be our last time fighting the Gnolls. We'll kill the bear again and see if we can find stairs leading up to the first level." Raelia tensed, realizing what that meant, but I doubted she wanted to spend an eternity in the dungeon. We rested and ate in the safe room before clearing the bear room again. The bear gave a major strength essence, and the chest still yielded the greater healing and stamina potions along with the silver coins. We might have to return to the room again if we needed more potions. I would have liked to stockpile them, but I felt that time was not on our side. I did not know if anyone from the company lived, but they might be having a harder time than we were, so finding them was a priority. I told Maveth, "Just take the best cuts from the bear. My space is getting close to full." Maveth nodded, and I knew the liver and kidneys were going to be harvested if nothing else. Raelia's attention snapped to me. You are not as big as I thought you were." Was that innuendo? Was she trying to joke and insult me in the same sentence? Maybe it was some residual anger from not storing the flowers. I held my tongue rather than retort, and I think the elf was disappointed that I was not playing along. We had fought together for days, which naturally brought soldiers closer. I was still wary of the elf, but found her tolerable. We quickly checked on the room I had not entered, the chamber with the black and gray rock landscape. Raelia identified the rock. That is cooled magma. I have flown into old volcanoes before. If something in there created it, I think we should avoid entering this room. We all stared for nearly an hour, seeing no movement. I decided, okay. We're not entering if we can't identify the opponent. No one disagreed, and we returned to the bear room. I gave Maveth his bow and 3 remaining arrows, and he managed to skewer a rabbit as we passed through. I was excited to see what essence it might yield. Raelia scoffed at my effort and said mockingly, "That creature is too small, Legionnaire. Even I know it will not yield an essence. I probably should not have tried, but I wanted to prove Raelia wrong, even if it revealed the utility of the collector." All 3 of us watched as the collector struggled to pull out the blue wisps from the creature. Raelia's grin growing at the probable failure. It took longer than normal, but a minor essence formed. Raelia had utter disbelief on her face, and Maveth just asked, "What is it?" I picked up the small sphere and was confused. It was a pale red, not pink. "It's a minor essence of fortitude," I said, perplexed. So far, every essence I had harvested or seen harvested had made sense. Fortitude was akin to mental endurance. Why did a rabbit yield it? "I'm going to keep it if that's okay, Maveth." He had killed the rabbit, so it probably should have gone to him. But I wanted to fortify the attribute. "It is your collector, Eric." "As far as I am concerned, all the essences are yours," Maveth replied with assurance. Raelia panicked and objected strongly. "Do not put those thoughts in his head, Maveth." I stopped the potential argument. "I don't mind sharing, but I will decide who gets what." I stood and popped the mental fortitude essence into my mouth. My head felt cloudy for a few moments before clearing. Raelia watched me intently, her eyes narrowing. I ordered us onward. "Let's explore the next room." The corridor curved left and right, snaking for a while before we reached the entrance to the next room. The chamber was large and roughly dome-shaped. It looked like a rolling grassy field, but our sight line was obstructed by a hill near the corridor's entrance. A massive, horse-sized black boar, with deep, slightly luminescent red eyes, was digging up the prairie grass on top of the hill. It grabbed a massive grub tangled in the roots of overturned grass. I let my first thought escape on seeing the boar. "Bacon," Raelia cautioned. "That is not a pig." The boar noisily chewed the grub and turned to face us. Bestial red eyes focused on us. Maveth voiced concern. "It is a dire boar. Dire animals have been mutated by ether. They are larger, stronger, and much more aggressive than their counterparts, Eric. I do not know if we have enough salt to cure it." The dire boar grunted, calling over a second beast. Soon, a second, third, and then a 4th dire boar arrived. 4 pairs of glowing red eyes stared straight at us. "We definitely do not have enough salt," Maveth remarked. We needed a plan. The dire boars were huge. Their size reminded me of American buffalo. Each of their off-white tusks was the size of my arm, and even with my armor, I figured getting gored would be painful if not deadly. One of the boars wandered closer to us. Raelia studied the creature and informed us what she knew. "The tusks may look dangerous, but it is the hooves you need to be wary of. Once they get you on the ground, they will trample you to death." Each boar looked to weigh over 1,000 pounds, and the thought of getting under their hooves was horrible. "So you've fought these before?" Raelia flushed at being questioned about her knowledge. "No. I was flying on Moonclaw over the seagrass plains and saw dire boars in action. I did not know what they were at the time, but my commander told me afterward. They chased down a pair of centaurs and trampled them to death. I have never seen a dire boar this close before. I assumed Moonclaw was her griffin, but she had never mentioned it before. So, how do we kill 4? I asked my group. I think they charge mindlessly in a straight line, like a bull. Mavaith offered after a short silence. Perhaps one of us could stand against the wall and trick it into running into it. Are you sure about that, Mavith? I asked uncertainly. Having been used as bait before, I did not like the idea. Mavith nodded slowly. Dire animals are common on Stone Mountain Island. Their instincts are to attack recklessly. Dire bears have killed many of my people, he added, nodding to Realia. She voiced some concern. Their hide is thick, or so I imagine. My fireball would just burn away their hair and make them angrier. We waited to ensure there were only 4 creatures as we discussed strategies. 2 were large males, and the other 2 were younger males, about half the size. They were mostly concerned with eating grubs, but Realia spotted one that found a truffle and consumed it while keeping the others at bay from its prize. After over 2 hours of watching, I finally decided on a plan. They are aware of us, but seem disinterested. All 3 of us will attack a single boar when it is separated from the others. Hopefully, the other 3 won't come at us together, and we can take down a second boar as a team. I will kill the 3rd, and then we can all work together on the 4th. As I spoke, I produced Realia's runic dagger and held it out for her. Her eyes widened briefly before she took it from me, and her expression was unreadable at the trust I was extending to her. She spent a moment attaching it to her belt before advising, "Do not run into the corridor if things go bad. Once we attack them, the creature will be free to pursue you if you leave the chamber. Dodging something that size will be impossible in the narrow corridor." We had gotten that answer from the shapeshifters, but we had not experienced it yet. Once you started fighting creatures in a dungeon room, the fight had to end with a victor. There was no retreat, as the creature could pursue you. It was half an hour later when our opportunity arrived. Just 15 feet from us, one of the smaller boars was near and isolated. My heart raced, and adrenaline surged as I led the charge into the room. My plan was to stab with my black blade behind the shoulder to reach the heart for a fatal blow. The boar turned too fast for me, and I only got a glancing slash, opening its hide on the shoulder. The cut felt as though I was cutting shoe leather with a steak knife. Despite the enchanted blade, it squealed loudly, calling the others. My shield arm stung as its head whipped around and its tusks smashed into me, forcing me to retreat a few steps. With its attention on me, Mavith's hammer came down on its head, crushing its skull and causing the beast to collapse instantly. Mavith's hammer was buried in the skull, and he needed a moment to extract it. I turned to look at the small hill as the thunder of hooves echoed ominously in the room. "Where's Realia?" Mavith asked. Shit, I did not see her. Had she ditched us now that she had 2 blades and thought she could escape the dungeon alone? I did not have time to worry. I braced myself for the first charging boar. It was one of the large ones. I layered 5 air shields in front of me and planned to roll to my right. The good news was that the boars were spaced about 20 feet apart. Mavith towered behind me, weapon retrieved. "We are dodging right, Mavith," I yelled as the boar thundered toward us. I dashed right and Mavith dove. The boar suddenly jolted to a stop, destroying 4 of the 5 air shields on impact. I planted my foot and lunged with the blade, achieving excellent penetration behind the shoulder. The stunned boar spun, ripping my embedded blade from my grip. Mavith's hammer came down on the back of its neck. I winced at the loud cracking sound on the spine, finishing the beast. We were not done, as the second large boar was too close, and I was forced to kill it with my dimensional space. Now brainless, its legs folded and it skidded into the first boar. The final opponent was one of the smaller boars, weighing only 600 or 700 pounds by my estimation. The ground still rumbled as it charged. Realia suddenly stood up, whipping her camouflage cloak back to reveal herself, and leaped onto its back as it passed her. She squeezed the creature with her legs, preventing herself from being thrown off, and drove her dagger and short sword into the creature's back. It reared and squealed at the sudden pain. The boar smartly started to roll onto its back to crush its rider, and I worried for the elf. However, as the boar rolled, she gracefully dismounted and rolled to cushion her fall. She had left her 2 weapons buried in the creature, and it did itself no favors by rolling. When it righted itself, it had trouble walking with the blades lodged deep in its shoulder. Grunting in pain with every step, it moved spasmodically toward Realia. I took a moment to pull my black blade free, as it got jammed between the boar's ribs when the beast collapsed. Mavith was already taunting the crippled creature. keeping its attention from the unarmed Raelia, allowing me to flank it from behind and slash the tendon on a back leg. After that, it was easy for us to finish off the immobilized creature. Raelia smiled as she went to retrieve her weapons. I, however, was not happy. That was not the plan, and you were hiding in the open. What if the boar trampled you? You did not tell us you were doing it. We thought you ran away. A shocked look came over her face at being yelled at. I think it was the first time I had truly shown anger at the elf. Her mind seemed to race and guilt appeared on her features. But instead of defending herself or yelling back like I expected, she just squeaked out softly. I gave her my angriest stare and waited for Mavaith to intercede and defend her. But he did the opposite, reiterating my points. Raelia, I am disappointed in you too. The plan was clear. You should have voiced your intentions to us. Mavaith's statement was like a slap to her, and she physically stumbled. Mavaith had taken her side ever since I had released her. She stared at her feet, no longer able to make eye contact. Was she going to cry? Why was I feeling bad? I relaxed. You did look like a badass doing it, but if our partnership is going to work, we need to communicate better. I looked over the bloody boars, soaking the earth into a pasty red mud. Maybe a token punishment? Mavaith Raelia will help you harvest the boars. Make sure she does most of the work. I'm going to search the rest of the chamber. I walked away and heard Raelia trying to understand what I said by asking Mavaith, "How is my ass bad?" "It does not smell at all. I just bathe." I chuckled to myself, as Mavaith tried to help her sort out my colloquialism. The ground was torn up around the chamber as the boars scavenged under the sod for grubs and truffles. The stone chest was near a small spring that fed a small pool on the far side of the hill. I shattered it and looked at the coins spread out in the grass. I was more excited about the silvery runic knife inside. The metal gleamed on the blade of the short single-edged weapon. No, not a weapon, but a skinning knife. Mavaith was going to love this. There was only one exit from this room, so the choice of direction was easy, rather than dig for grubs. I returned to the others while waiting for my ether to recharge to retrieve the collector. With a grin, I handed the Goliath the knife. "Mavaith, try this out." It was in the reward chest. I presented him with the skinning knife. Mavaith took the blade reverently while Raelia looked on, her eyes clearly recognizing it as an artificed weapon. Mavaith cut into the belly of the next boar, the skin parting without much effort, and the gray-skinned man smiled. "This is remarkable. Thank you for letting me use it." "No, Mavaith, it's yours, as well as 2 of the essences from these creatures. We definitely wouldn't have won without you." It was a small jab at Raelia's actions as well. She had abandoned us at the start of the attack, doing her own thing. The collector appeared in my hand, and I collected 2 Apex Constitution Essences and 2 Major Constitution Essences. I gave the 2 Apex Essences to Mavaith while Raelia watched jealously. I moved a distance away, pocketing the other 2 Essences. I had not gotten used to the gamey smell of animals being harvested. Mavaith was joyously using the new knife, cutting away chunks rapidly and handing them to Raelia, who could barely keep up with stacking the meat and organs. Raelia was covered in blood and did not look happy. 4 buffalo-sized boars gave a lot of meat. Mavaith asked for the other bag of salt, and he only cured 1 slab of belly fat, conserving our dwindling salt stores for cooking. He stacked the other slabs nearly 3 feet high. I sent them to storage so they would not spoil, but I doubted we would find more salt in a dungeon. I also had to temper Mavaith's excitement over his new tool. I added less than a quarter of what he harvested to my space. "Mavaith, that's it. I do not have more free space," Mavaith pleaded. "Eric, can I peel the intestines?" "Surely you have enough room to take the casings so we can make sausage in the future." "How long did the Goliath think we were going to be trapped in a dungeon?" I acquiesced and made a small box with my hand. "This big, Mavaith. I need to have some space reserved for killing creatures too." Mavaith eagerly started working on the intestines. He had to strip them, scrape them, and then turn them inside out and scrape them again, all while washing them thoroughly. He needed water for his work and fouled the only pool in the room. He had a dozen 6-foot sections when he was done. I guess the saying that you do not want to know how the sausage is made is true. We spent over half a day in the room before packing up and heading to the next one. The corridor was not long, and we were a bit surprised to find another safe room. But this safe room was special, as it had stairs ascending to presumably the first level at one end and a black, oily door at the other. It had been so long since we had seen a dungeon exit. Mavith and I just stared at it in disbelief. Reelia questioned, "Are we going to leave?" "I thought you said the city was full of specters." "Yes, it is. We cannot leave, no matter how tempting it looks right now. We will certainly be killed. We need to find Castile first. I could not tell her there was also an elven summoner out there trying to kill us. She might risk running to seek his protection." Reelia went to the elven script on the wall. "It says dire boars ahead. Guess dungeon notes are not useful if you are going backward." She offered a weak smile at us before continuing to read the faded script. Mavith asked curiously, "Does it say anything else?" "Nothing useful. The truffles the boars were eating are valuable, but other than that, it does not say much." Reelia claimed one of the stone shelves and started unpacking her pack. "Mavith, what do you want to prepare for dinner?" I asked while breaking my eyes from the tempting exit. "I spent time getting his supplies, and then I went to scout the stairs." Reelia jumped to her feet. "I will come with you." I considered her for a moment. "Stay with Mavith. If there are legionnaires at the top of the steps, well, you can imagine." I stated neutrally. "Frustrated," she said. "Just do not go in the room. It will seal you inside if it is the final room before a descent." Was Reelia actually concerned for my safety? I paused, but did not respond to the elf as I climbed the stairs. There was a lot of hope riding on each step I took. Was the rest of the company on the first level? Were they still alive? Was Castile among them? The stairs did not corkscrew as I climbed, but the wall had a long, slow curve. When the stairs ended, I was on a small landing with a large circular room beyond. The floor was packed earth. The walls of this chamber had a thick green slime covering them, giving the entire room an eerie green light, but that was not what caught my attention. A massive drake circled restlessly in the center of the room, its powerful body rippling with hidden muscle. The drake's dark mahogany-brown scales glistened under the flickering light, and its lack of wings marked it as an earth Drakian, imposing creature I had recognized from the pages of the bestiary. Yet, it loomed much larger than a typical member of its species, creating a daunting presence that filled the vast space. As I scanned the chamber, a flash of crimson caught my attention on the far side, where a legionnaire who had been seated in quiet observation had now risen to his feet. The chamber stretched over 200 feet in length, an expanse that made it difficult for me to discern his features. In a moment of resolve, I lifted my helm to reveal my face, revealing myself. He met my gesture by removing his own helm, and for a brief instant, our eyes locked in mutual recognition. The steel helmet, with its scratched red lacquer, came off, and I recognized him immediately. Even with a scraggly beard, the familiar lines of Culm's face were easy to make out across the chamber. The company armorer was alive. "Eric, is that you?" he yelled across the chamber, clearly skeptical and not believing what he was seeing. I remembered he was with Flavius, Linus, and Dante. A relieved smile spread across my face. "It is me. Are you alone?" I yelled back. The earth drake that had been agitated was now going into a frenzy as we yelled back and forth, making conversation difficult. It was not permitted to leave the room, and two tasty meals encased in red armor were talking back and forth, just out of its reach. Flavius, Linus, Dante, Brutus, and Fabian are at the other end of the passage. "They are fishing in the last room," he yelled back. I relaxed somewhat. 5 men of the company were alive, and so was the scholar. Admittedly, I could have done without one of them being Flavius. "Mavith and I are fine as well. I'm glad Brutus found you," I replied. My thoughts turned to the forthcoming reunion, and what it would mean no longer being able to use my ability, or the collector in storing Roelia. We found him. He wouldn't leave his entry room to fight the spiders. He was with the scholar and starving. We were surprised he had not eaten the scholar. I could not even contemplate such an action, but when men got desperate, they would do anything to survive. "How are you on food?" I yelled across. "Not great, but we have enough to go around if we can reunite." We managed to clear a few rooms, but only this last one had a decent source of food with the fish. He turned and looked back down the hallway. "I have to get back, Eric. They are fishing in the previous room, but the pair of harpies will return soon. Our safe room is just beyond the harpy room, the left hallway coming from this direction. I'm sure Flavius can come up with a plan to take care of this. he indicated toward the powerful earth drake. Just hold on a bit. I will go get someone, he reassured. Then he was gone, disappearing as if he were a figment of my imagination. I watched the large pseudo-dragon storm around the chamber for over an hour. It looked powerful and well-muscled, with thick scales that moved like small shields along its body. Its head appeared bony, and its jaws sported dozens of 6-inch fangs. It calmed down a few moments after Calm left and focused all its attention on me. Just over an hour later, Flavius and Brutus arrived with Calm. They talked among themselves before Flavius yelled across, "Eric, we cannot defeat this drake." Calm was watching it, looking for a weakness, but attacking would be a death sentence. "Have you seen anyone else?" I tempered my reply. "Nevaeh is still with me. We appeared on a lower floor of the dungeon." I pointed behind me. "There are stairs here, leading down," Brutus yelled. "What happened when you entered?" His tone held some anger, likely for being left to fend for himself with just the scholar. I explained what had happened. Nevaeh got struck multiple times by a specter and lost contact with the scholar. He was in bad shape when we entered, and we have had a rough time of it on the lower levels. I said this more to mollify the clearly angry Brutus. "No sign of Castile?" I added to brush past his antipathy. There was a brief conversation I could not hear before Flavius yelled back across the chamber, stirring the earth drake. Brutus and the scholar exited the dungeon to re-enter 3 days after everyone else entered. Brutus added, yelling over the drake's movements. "I was hoping to appear in a different entry room with another group. The bodies of Remus and Soren were just outside the dungeon entrance, torn apart. The snow was packed around the entrance, and there were half a dozen specters as well. The news of the death of our company mates was hard to swallow. What about Cyrus? Only one group of 3 had entered the dungeon. Cyrus, Soren, and Remus." Brutus impatiently replied, "I didn't have time to check all the body parts, but I did not see him. He could be wyvern shit by now, for all I know." Flavius took over the conversation. "We think the summoner is in the dungeon with us." "What? Why would he enter the dungeon?" I was confused by the stupidity of it. Why trap himself in here? Was his lust for vengeance really that great? Flavius answered. "The wyverns were gone, but they killed Soren and Remus," Brutus added. "After the specters chased us back into the dungeon, the scholar said he saw bloody footprints in the snow heading into the dungeon. They were narrow, like an elf's, and definitely not legion boots. There was a prolonged period of silence as they let me absorb the implications. We were fighting for our lives in every room, and being hunted by a mage seeking revenge." Flavius broke the silence. "Eric, we have to head back past the harpy room to reach our safe room. Linus has a broken leg, and Dante is recovering from spider poison. Even if they were healthy, I don't think we could defeat this creature." The earth drake hissed at Flavius in apparent challenge at his gestures. Calm was the last to leave and tried to encourage me. "If we can find Castile, she can defeat this drake. Stay alive until then." I gave him some parting knowledge. All the bears have had healing potions in their reward chests. Calm. He nodded curtly in thanks, and I heard Flavius yell at Calm to hurry. The earth drake focused solely on me now. It lay down on all fours, its long neck extended toward me, and its glossy black eyes waited. I waited 10 minutes and took out the collector in the meantime. I decided to talk to the creature. "You know I have killed a wyvern before, and it was much bigger than you." The drake cocked its head like a dog and turned to the other passage to confirm no one was there before focusing on me again. I stepped into the room, and its body tensed as its head snapped up. Then, like a marionette with its strings cut, it collapsed to the ground. The drake had resisted, but not as strongly as the wyvern had. It still bottomed out my ether, but I was now so accustomed to the feeling that I could brush off the disorientation it created. I was not going to pursue the others right now. Maybe after I moved Realia to the safety of my storage, we could reunite with them. I balanced the collector on the drake's bony head and left it for now while my aether recovered. The reward chest was in the center of the chamber. It was the largest I had seen, the size of a narrow coffin. It also took a little more effort to shatter it. A few gold coins were mixed in with silver, but the real prize was the spear on top of the coins. The leaf tip was matte black, like it had been left in a fire too long, and was covered in soot. The shaft was black wood, but after hefting the spear and studying it, I noticed the grain of the wood spiraled and was extremely dense. I went through a few forms, assessing the weapon, and it hummed through the air faster than it should have. It was a little hefty but a well-balanced weapon. Even though I could not see any runic script anywhere on the spear, I was fairly certain it was a dungeon artifact. I walked to the walls to study the green slime, carrying the spear with me. The slime appeared to flow across the surface, and its faint smell reminded me of rotten eggs. I guessed this was the only thing the drake had to eat, and I could not blame its eagerness to eat us instead. I was about to return to use the collector when I paused at the slime wall. It appeared too smooth and was shaped like a door. The tip of the spear cut through the slime curtain that concealed another corridor with no flowing lights in the ceiling or the floor. I flicked the slime off the tip and watched as it slowly began to cover the entrance again. Interesting. I returned to use the collector, and thick blue lines were drawn on it. The essence that formed was an apex earth essence. My body briefly shuddered, remembering the last time I consumed an apex essence with the earth affinity. Castile had explained that adding new affinities to your core was not dangerous, but it overwhelmed me since I had received a greater benefit from each essence with my convergent spell form. Before descending the stairs, I waited long enough to store the coins, spear, and earth essence in my space. I then positioned the heavy drake's head to face away from the passageway, so that if the others returned, they would think the drake was sleeping. I also concealed the chest remains behind the drake's tail. Raelia was sleeping when I returned, and Maveth looked up from a pot of stew he was attending. His deep voice asked quietly, "What was at the top of the stairs?" "A fat earth drake." Also, there were a few members of the company on the far side of the chamber. They didn't want to risk fighting the earth drake. Flavius, Calm, Linus, Brutus, Scholar Fabian, and Dante are alive. I informed the Goliath and watched Raelia carefully to see if she was listening. Her body did not flinch, and drool dripped down her cheek. Maveth looked over his shoulder at her too. "Any news on Castile?" Maveth asked as softly as he could. "No. Remus and Soren are dead, though." I was not going to tell Maveth about the elven summoner with Raelia, possibly overhearing. Maveth nodded slowly at the news. "What do you want to do?" "They are retreating past a room with harpies to another safe room. There was another exit from the Earth Drake room. We will explore that for now," I said as I took the bowl of offered stew. Maveth had mixed the pork and bear meat together, but it needed a longer simmer to break down the tissue. The potatoes were well cooked and balanced the meal. I felt a little guilty about not reuniting with the men to share our food stores. I could not postpone it forever, though. I sat down opposite the Griffin rider, studying her momentarily before setting up my sleeping arrangements. The amulet was in my hand, and I confirmed with eye contact that Maveth would remain awake while I slept. With the ring of sustenance almost acclimatized to my body, I was down to about 4 hours to feel fully rested. The entrance to the Dreamscape dungeon felt familiar. It weirdly almost felt like home now. Seeing Constantine almost made me miss the guy until he asked to spar. I materialized a replica of my new spear, and his eyebrow arched. "Another new weapon? We are going to have to train you twice as long and hard to master both the black blade and this black spear," Constantine said eagerly. I rolled my eyes and decided I would practice for a time with Xavier, the swordmaster. Of course, I did not know how Xavier would fight someone with a spear or the spear and shield. The practice was inefficient, but I found some comfort with the new weapon. Before leaving the Dreamscape, I went to the Elven collection of herbalism and apothecary books to look up the sundrop flowers and sugarweed. The sugarweed petals needed to be dried in an oven. They were used as a sweetener, like Raelia had said. They were also used to ease stomach cramps and help digestion when made into tea. I regretted not at least taking some of them. The sundrops were also interesting. They only bloomed in early spring and were actually eaten by animals of both sexes to increase fertility, not particularly useful to me. I finished my 4 hours in the Dreamscape and left. Maveth had cleaned up and was playing checkers with Raelia. As I started putting things away, I told Maveth, "You have 8 hours to sleep before we climb the stairs." Maveth nodded and won the game. To Raelia's consternation in the next few minutes, Maveth took a few minutes to get comfortable, but was soon snoring softly on the stone shelf. Raelia looked at me expectantly. I guessed it was time to have the tough conversation about her going back into my dimensional space. I was eyeing her, trying to figure out how to tell her I needed to put her back in my space, when Realia finally asked, "Do you want my legacy blade back? You know, to ensure I do not stab you in the back?" Her tone was conversational, and I was unsure if she was joking or serious, but I detected no malice in her words. What? It took me a second to remember she called her runic dagger a legacy blade. "No, you can keep it. What is a legacy blade?" She drew it and fingered the script. "My family surname is Glavian. When my ancestors lived in Esenhem, our family was part of the military class. Everyone in the family participated as either a soldier or an administrator in one of the corps. When the Esenhem consuls signed a peace treaty with the Tellians, most of the Glavians migrated to the Barteradian Empire to continue fighting the Tellian Empire. My grandfather passionately believed the Tellian Empire needed to be stopped." She eyed me accusingly in my red Legion armor. My Legion armor was in a sorry state, and I looked more like a vagabond merc than a legionnaire. I had no response and doubted that agreeing with her would change her opinion of me. She sheathed her dagger. "It is tradition for us to carry legacy blades into battle, so that if we fall, our bodies can be identified. That does not make any sense." "If there's only one blade, what about your siblings? Do you have any? Do they have legacy blades too?" I asked, showing genuine interest. Realia let a small smile escape. "Yes, I have an older and younger brother who are still living. My older brother is General Clallan Glavian. My younger brother has not yet chosen his path. The legacy blades go to the eldest on both the matriarchal and patriarchal sides. My mother gave me this legacy blade, which she carried with her into battle. Clallan has one given to him by our father. My youngest brother will carry a newly forged blade with our father's name when he begins his service. The parent's name is always on the blade, so they know who to return it to." I remembered the general had been searching frantically for Realia in Machat. He had dismissed common military sense in his quest to find his sister, but the blitz had worked in his favor. She did not tense as I sat next to her. I was not sure if I should ask the question, as it reminded her of the past, but I did. "How did you become a griffin rider?" She tensed, the tendon on her neck showing for a moment as she clenched her teeth before relaxing. I thought I had made a mistake, but she relaxed. "I am small among my people. At first I wanted to be a ranger and a scout for the army. As I was training to be a ranger, I saw the griffin riders in action and became enamored with the idea of taking to the skies." "What is flying like?" Mavaith's deep voice cut into our conversation. I had not even realized he was awake, and maybe his flatulence was intentional to get me to move closer to Realia. Realia genuinely smiled for the first time since I had known her. Her teeth were stained from the berries, but that did not detract from her youthful beauty. Her stern face relaxed and two small dimples appeared on her cheeks. "It is freedom, power, and ecstasy, all rolled into one." Mavaith sat up, clearly interested in the topic. He asked eagerly, "How did you tame your griffin?" "Was it hard?" Realia laughed, realizing his intentions. "Mavaith, I was allowed to become a rider because of my size. You are too large to mount a griffin. It would never get off the ground." "Mavaith, don't listen to her. If you want to ride a griffin, I will help you find one big enough for you." Realia looked at me skeptically, and I could not hold back my laughter at the joke. She soon joined in, realizing I had not been serious. "If there were a griffin large enough for you, I would be petrified of it," Realia said as the laughter died down. "Mavaith, we raise the griffins from the egg. It is important to feed them and spend hours with them as they grow to maturity over the course of a year. It is another year after that before they can take a rider. You build loyalty with each other, and they become your best friend." She trailed off, struggling to get the words out. "I'm sorry about your griffin. Moonclaw, was it?" I thought I sounded conciliatory, but Realia clenched her fist, her forearms flexing. Tears pooled in her blue-green eyes and rolled down her cheeks. "It was my fault. I flew too low over the city. I put us in range of your mages. I did not say anything, and Mavaith remained quiet. We let her cry for a bit before she spoke again. I realized I did it again when we fought the dire boars. I did not follow orders and it risked getting Maveth killed. After a long pause, she added, "And you too." She hid a small smirk at withholding my name at first. I was beginning to understand that Raelia did not just have a youthful appearance, in fact, truly was youthful. She was brash and reckless of mind as well. It felt like the right time to break the upsetting news. "Raelia, we're headed back to the first floor. There are legionnaires up there who cannot see you with us." She tensed, her hand reflexively covering the handle of her runic dagger. But she relaxed slowly. "When the time comes, you should be holding both of your weapons." Both Raelia and Maveth looked at me questioningly. I explained, "If I am killed, everything in my dimensional space will materialize. Whatever or whoever killed me will probably not be friendly." Saying it out loud was sobering. A heavy silence fell over us. "Is there anything I should be aware of in such a scenario? Will I be buried under purple potatoes? Or will 10 other women appear with me as well?" Raelia said jokingly. "Give me a minute." "Sometimes I forget what's in there myself," I said, pretending to focus straight ahead. "Let me see on mostly dead ogre, a horse, and just 2 other elf maidens, not 10. But you probably do not know them, as I made their acquaintance before I met you." Maveth's eyes bugged a little, and Raelia's jaw fell open, unable to speak. Did they really think I was telling the truth? Maveth seemed the most perplexed. "Do you have Ginger in there?" Raelia's eyes shot to Maveth and then to me, thinking Ginger was a person. Maveth thankfully explained, "Ginger is Eric's horse, not an elf maiden." Although it was funny, I stopped the speculation, sounding exasperated. "No, I was joking. I do not have an ogre, a horse, or a harem elves. I have camping equipment, all the food we've harvested, some weapons, and a few things I picked up here and there." "Raelia, stay behind us until I confirm no one from the company is in the Earth Drake chamber." We climbed the stairs, and Maveth walked straight in when he saw the dead drake. "You already killed it," he said excitedly. He walked around it, inspecting it and testing the scaled hide. I motioned Raelia forward, as there were no legionnaires here. Raelia was also impressed. "That is the largest earth drake I have ever seen." She did not want to get too close and instead kicked the stone shards from the destroyed reward chest. She was probably wondering what had been in it, given the amount of stone. Maveth stood, grumbling to himself. I think he was about to educate me on what I should have done. "The scales are useful for making shields. Claws and teeth can be made into useful tools, as they are much harder than normal bones. The flesh is too dense and would need a long cooking time to break down the tissue. I say we harvest the teeth and claws to sell. It's been just over half a day since I killed it, so I will give you an hour," I informed Maveth. "Where is the other exit?" Raelia asked, looking up from the stone shards. "You said there were 2 exits." I pointed at the green slime wall. She walked to it, perplexed. Maveth had his runic knife out, so I joined Raelia. She reached out and touched the slime with her finger, then sniffed it. "Is that safe?" I asked, standing next to her. She looked at me. "It is green slime mold. Goblins use it as a food source because it grows quickly. If it were dangerous, my finger would have burned. It is the only thing in here the drake could have eaten." I did not tell her that was also my conclusion. I would let her think she was smarter than me. She had not found the hidden door yet, as it was 10 feet to her right. I drew my black blade and walked to the smoother part of the wall. I cut the slime like a curtain to reveal the dark passage beyond. I made to hand her a retrieved glowstone. She dismissed it with a wave. "I do not need that. I can see just fine in dim light." She made to step into the corridor, and I grabbed her shoulder. "Wait till Maveth finishes playing with the drake." Raelia nodded but watched, fascinated, as the green slime once again hid the entrance. "That is different. The slime mold grows so quickly and not just on a surface." She took her own runic dagger to cut away the slime again and watched it reform over the passage entry. I walked to Maveth, who had cut away the drake's lips to get easy access to the gums as he sought to pry the fangs out. Even with the runic knife, he was struggling. "I think I can get the fangs in the allotted hour, Eric. If you want the claws, you'll need to help. It's all you, Maveth. I thought about scouting the harpy room, but I might get spotted if the others were in there or watching it. Maveth got 12 10-inch-long fangs from the drake's mouth. He was grinning as he stuffed them into his bag. He was a mess of blood from his work, but was happy about his harvest. If I can find a master crafter, these will make exceptional cooking tools. I just nodded in affirmation. Raelia was already cutting away the slime, eager to explore the dark passage. I handed Maveth one of my 4 glowstones, and we entered. The slime slowly formed its curtain behind us, making this path feel more ominous than others. It was the first part of any dungeon I had entered that lacked a light source. However, there was that magical dark room near the shapeshifter room. We walked about 50 feet before Raelia spoke. This could be a new dungeon room that the dungeon has not finished yet. Dungeons feed off the ley lines and grow like the roots of a plant over hundreds of years. Maveth questioned her assumption. Wouldn't that mean it grows downward? I am not knowledgeable about dungeons, but they grow in all directions around the ley line they feed off of. She stopped walking, and we all stopped with her. I hear running water, Raelia said. We proceeded to walk, and the walls seemed different somehow. I could not place it as we walked farther. The corridor opened to a rocky balcony overlooking a massive chasm. Water cascaded on the far side, but our glowstones were not strong enough to show us the other side. Maveth was the first to realize it. We are not in the dungeon any longer. There was no doubt or surprise from me or Raelia, as we felt it too. It was like we were no longer being watched and soaking in the dense dungeon ether. Where are we? I asked, feeling heat waves rising from the deep chasm, and I was starting to sweat. Maveth said with awe in his voice, "The endless dark." The chasm before us made no sense in its immense scope. I had heard a legionnaire mention the endless dark before. The only thing I know about the endless dark is that it is where the goblin hordes come from. What is it doing inside a dungeon? Raelia, also in awe, stood dangerously close to the edge. She rasped softly. It is not inside a dungeon. The dungeon is inside of it. Dungeons are part of the endless dark, feeding off the ley lines deep in the earth. We're miles below the surface. Maveth could not resist tossing a rock into the chasm. It bounced along the wall on its descent, creating echoing sounds even over the water cascading on the other side. "Let's get back to the dungeon," I said, suddenly having a bad feeling. Flickers of lightning appeared deep within the chasm below, and I felt the temperature rising. We exchanged quick glances, and that was all we needed to spur us into running back to the safety of the dungeon. Shadows from our glowstones bounced around us as our feet scraped the stone. When we reached the end of the passage, there was no curtain of green slime lit by the glowstone. Instead, there was a solid, uneven rock. Damn it. I pounded on the wall, and it echoed slightly. The dungeon was trying to seal us out. I tried to create a box to send the stone into my dimensional space, but the attempt rebounded, causing me to stumble. Disoriented, I bellowed, "Maveth, use your hammer!" He understood and swung into the rock, breaking through a thin covering to create a small opening as the green slime tried to cover the hole. I pushed Raelia through first and followed. I did not even mind getting covered in the green slime as I pressed through the hole. Maveth crawled after us, and we all turned to watch the green slime cover the gap. Breathing heavily, wiping and spitting the slime from my face, I was relieved to see the drake was still dead. I had been worried it would have been revived by the dungeon. It seemed like this had all been a trick by the dungeon to kick us outer, probably just me. I speculated that it really did not like how I won our fights. Breathing heavily, Maveth asked, "What happened?" "The dungeon tried to lock us out. I tried to create a door, but it was like when I tried to kill a creature without entering the room. My attempt backlashed on me," I said, still sweating from the heat of the chasm and the adrenaline surging through my veins. "Dungeons follow rules," Raelia said, disgustedly cleaning the green slime from her hair. She had gone first, and took the brunt of the slime. She whipped a glob off her hand. No one knows why. One of those rules is that you need to enter a room to fight a creature. Once a fight begins, the creature can pursue anywhere in the dungeon. What are the rest of the rules? Maveth's deep voice intoned as we all calmed down. It did not appear there was anything pursuing us. The ones I remember you already know. Safe rooms can't have dungeon creatures in them. Once you enter a room, a monster can pursue you out of it. There's a reward for clearing a room. Raelia stopped cleaning herself and thought. She held up her hand and seemed to be counting. trying to remember. Rooms will reset after 1 day. And if you rest in a corridor between rooms for more than a day, the creatures in any connected rooms can pursue you. She had not offered any new information. Is that all you remember? I pressed her. Any new knowledge would be welcome. Raelia nodded. The dungeons I entered were not as dangerous as this one, and they were more for training us to work as a team against non-humanoids. Raelia's head snapped in alarm to the far entrance, and I swore as I turned. I expected company men, but instead I saw a small green goblin sprinting frantically out of the corridor. It stumbled into a roll when it noticed the massive earth drake in the chamber's center. The goblin child was familiar. It was the one I had released to distract the bear. How had it survived for so long? Maveth's rumbling voice questioned. Do you all see a goblin, too? Horrid screeches of feminine anger followed the goblin out of the corridor. Harpies, I warned my group. Harpies? Raelia questioned. The goblin must have run through the last room. It had a pair of harpies in it. I explained while drawing my blade and rushing to the corridor to meet them. The frail goblin wasn't a concern. The harpy screams echoed down the corridor as they approached, and my head ached from the discordant cadence of their screams, which sounded like a mutilated song that I couldn't ignore. My mind clouded, and it was a strain to remain focused. Claws clicked rapidly on stone as they approached. I stood at the side of the passage opening and waited. Maveth had pursued the goblin, and I could not yell at him for help, or I would alert the harpies. The first harpy stumbled into the room, and my blade came down on the back of its neck. I mistimed my swing, but managed to sever one of its leathery wings. It screeched in pain, sending a pressing migraine through my head. I pivoted to finish it with another swing when the second harpy plowed into me, talons first. I was pinned underneath the creature, struggling as I learned more about harpies than I ever wanted to know in those next few seconds. Their legs were massive bird legs with talons, trying to tear my armor off. It also had long claws on its hands that tried to reach my exposed face. A grotesque woman's face with greasy black hair, wild eyes, and sharp teeth hissed and spat at me. I struggled to hold the heavy creature at bay. Its talons had a strong grip on me, and it was much heavier than it looked. Strangely, in my struggle, I remembered a curse my comrades used. Harpy tits, and yes, the torso of this creature was well-muscled and would have been attractive on any buxom human woman. Close your eyes, Raelia yelled. I trusted her in that moment because I thought I knew what she was doing. Heat erupted around me as a wave of fire enveloped me for not more than a fraction of a second, blasting the creature away and freeing me. My armor protected me from the worst of it, but my face was blistered, and I smelled burnt hair. I slashed the one I had crippled with my black blade, ending its pained cries. The lone remaining harpy was hobbled, its wings shredded, and half its face burned. Its one good glossy black eye contained more malice than I could fathom. It tried to scream, but Raelia's legacy dagger suddenly appeared in its throat, and it grasped at it as it struggled to breathe. I glanced at Raelia, who stood 20 feet away. I nodded at her, my voice cracked from the dry heat. Nice throw. I stepped into the harpy's reach and stabbed it in the chest, aiming for its heart. I backed away before it could retaliate as it died. My face burned, and I reached for the ether potion but stopped. It was best not to waste the treasure, and just deal with the pain. The only threat now was the goblin. I saw Maveth chasing the goblin around the corpse of the earth drake. The small goblin was bone-thin, but incredibly fast. It definitely had a strong survival instinct. Raelia stood beside me, looking concerned. I am sorry. It was the only thing I could think of to help you. You did the right thing, my voice creaked out. I thought I'd inhaled some of the fireball as my lungs also burned along with my face. The harpy's claws would have ripped out my throat if she had not helped me. It was almost comical as we both watched the goblin avoid Maveth by using the large drake as cover. If Maveth got too close, it would scramble over the drake to the other side, the large scales making excellent handholds for its tiny, nimble fingers. Neither Raelia nor I moved to help Maveth. Finally, I said, "It's not a dungeon creature, Maveth. I brought it in here and released it when I fought my first bear." Maveth stopped his pursuit and looked at me, his chest heaving from his efforts. The goblin also looked exhausted, but studied Raelia and me. Even with my red and blistering face, recognition flashed in the goblin's eyes. That quickly turned to fear, and it bolted for the exit, descending the stairs to the safe room in a heartbeat. "Let it go!" I yelled to Mavaith. In an odd way, I felt sorry for the creature if it had survived over a week in the dungeon, running for its life. My guess was that it ran through a room and pulled the monsters into the next room to fight each other. I walked to Mavaith and began healing my face as my ether recovered. Mavaith was apologetic. "Sorry, I did not help with the harpies. I got focused on the goblin." I looked at the part of the wall where the green slime covered the exit to the endless dark. The slime was no longer a flat surface, which indicated there was now a rock behind it. Had we just passed up a chance to leave the dungeon? How would we have even scaled the chasm, and how far below the surface were we? No, we made the right choice, and whatever was at the bottom of the chasm was not friendly. The harpies both yielded major charm essences. The essences had spiraling smoke inside in a mix of white and blue. If you looked at the pattern too long, it made you dizzy. I handed both to a surprised Raelia. She had possibly saved my life, and definitely played the largest role in the victory. She studied my face, which was now mostly healed. "I'm sorry you had to waste a healing potion on your face," I shrugged, not telling her I could heal myself. I looked to the Goliath. "Mavaith, it's fine. Let's move back to the safe room." I looked seriously at Raelia. "You're going to have to return to my dimensional space." She did not appear as reluctant now. Maybe there was a little trust between us. We slowly descended the long set of stairs, concerned the goblin could have drawn the dire boars into the safe room. There were no goblins or boars at the bottom of the stairs. Mavaith began to cook while I scouted the boar room to ensure there was no threat. I had recovered enough aether to kill a boar if needed. 2 boars were clearly visible as I approached the dire boar chamber, blocking the entrance while the small goblin huddled, trying to make itself small in the corridor. My armor rasped loudly as I walked, the resin-infused leather plates having melted and deformed a little from the fireball, no longer sliding seamlessly against each other. The goblin spun back and forth between the 2 boars and me, trying to decide on the lesser of 2 dangers. At just over 12 feet away, I didn't give it a chance to make its final decision. I aligned some free space and sent the creature into my dimensional space. I had recovered enough aether, and having something in my dimensional space that could serve as a distraction in a future fight seemed like a good idea. I returned to the safe room. "The goblin's taken care of," was all I said as I sat down. "After we eat, Raelia," I told her, and she nodded in understanding. The meal consisted mostly of us speculating on why the dungeon was trying to get rid of us. Raelia thought we had just caught it in the process of expanding its labyrinth, and did not think the dungeon had enough awareness to target us specifically. She managed to convince Mavaith of this, even though I was fairly certain the dungeon was targeting me. I think it recognized me as a threat and a nuisance. After storing the goblin, I had to draw out the meal to recover enough aether. Raelia seemed to think it was due to my reluctance to store her, which worked in my favor, as I felt we had built a bit of trust, and I no longer saw her as an enemy. Raelia finally stood. "Let us get this over with. If I am trapped inside you for a long time, know that I am not going to be happy when I am let out." Raelia drew her 2 blades. "Put your pack over there," I instructed, pointing to the shelf. "You'll want to be unburdened when you come out." She nodded and did as instructed. She prepared herself and nodded. "You can keep the ranger's cloak," I said, pushing her into my space before she could respond. Mavaith seemed sad as I went over to her pack. I took out the thermal stone first since we had not used it to prepare the meal. "Eric, what are you doing?" Mavaith asked, repacking her bag a little. I sorted everything out, and when I had enough aether, I pulled out food. Mavaith understood and started to help. When we left the dungeon, she was going to need food to get back to Barteradian lands. Before repacking everything, I made a decision and pulled out a large egg. Mavaith was confused. "Is that an egg? It is huge. What is it?" I think Mavaith was salivating at the culinary implications. "This is a griffin egg, Mavaith." His eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Help me pack it so it's protected with all this food." During the process of packing Raelia's backpack, I told Mavaith the tale of how I acquired a griffin egg. When we finished, I sent the pack to my space, and Mavaith asked, "Do you have any more eggs? Chicken eggs, preferably. I miss omelets." I laughed at the large man. No, that was the only egg I had in my space. I took a deep breath and held up a major essence with shifting colors. Can you watch over me as I take this? It's the illusion affinity from the shapeshifters. Mavith nodded. I will watch over you. We had talked about this before me unpleasant experience with the Apex Earth essence. Hopefully, using one of the major essences instead of an apex to unlock my illusion magic would not be as bad. It felt like it was the right time to experiment before reconnecting with the company. The essence dissolved in my mouth, and goosebumps ran across my body. My skin tingled as the electric heat left my stomach and spread across my body. This isn't so bad. I suddenly vomited, and my muscles clenched. I curled into a ball on the floor and let the process work its way to completion, trying to block out the pain. Through the pain, I kept trying to remind myself that it was not as bad as consuming the Apex Earth essence in Makkah. Mavith's voice echoed in the back of my mind as he tried to communicate, but the pain consumed all my focus. I bit my tongue, tasting the metallic, coppery blood that filled my mouth. As the pain finally ebbed away, my clenching muscles relaxed. I rasped out, "How long?" Mavith was kneeling over me. "Less than a minute. Are you okay, Eric?" That looked unpleasant. There was no way it had been only a minute. I moved to a sitting position, every part of my body aching. "Shit. What is it, Eric? You smell horrible like rotten eggs and your skin is slimy." Mavith voiced his concern but still backed away. "Yeah, I shit myself too. If I ever do this again, I'm going to make sure I've purged both ends before I start." I spat out the residual vomit and tried not to move my ass too much. My throat was sore, and I used some healing on my damaged tendons and ligaments from clenching so hard. The fouled clothing and filthy underclothes were definitely staying behind in this dungeon. I recalled the conversation with calm. The harpy room had some water, at least they said they were fishing there. We should be able to get past the earth drake since it hasn't been a day yet. There should also be a reward chest to claim in the harpy room. "I will walk ahead of you," Mavith said, scrunching his nose. I was going to retort that I had put up with his body odor for a long time. But then again, my own smell was making me nauseous and causing my eyes to water at the moment. We climbed the stairs, which was no fun in my soiled clothes. The dead earth drake was still there, and we cautiously crossed into the next corridor. It curved slightly before arriving at the harpy room. The harpy room had a mix of short green trees and tall deadwood trees. I did not see any sign of the legionnaires, and the stone reward chest was visible next to a large pool in the center of the room. Without my armor on, I had Mavith lead. "You go first, Mavith. I have enough Aether to manage one problem," he nodded, and we passed the short trees with red berries on them. Mavith ate one of the berries and immediately spat it out. "This is bitter. Eric, do not try it. Do not try it." I picked one of the berries anyway and inspected it. It looked like a small cherry, but it obviously was not. The bean was white and looked oddly familiar. "Mavith, I think this is a coffee bean. We have them in Singa." I was not completely sure, but from my reading I knew there was a dessert beverage that sounded like coffee. They roasted, crushed, and filtered water through the beans to create a rich black drink. It certainly sounded like coffee. I had not found coffee in the Tellian Empire, but many tea varieties were available. We both walked to the pond in the center of the chamber and looked into it. It was about 20 feet across, and Calm had been right about there being fish in this room. This variety of fish was smaller than the eels or other fish I had already discovered. They were rotund and barely larger than my hand. They bobbed to the surface before diving deep into the depths of the pool and disappearing. I guess they needed air to breathe, which gave the harpies a chance to swoop down and grab them from their perches in the dead trees. I gratefully stripped, tossing my underclothes in a pile for the dungeon to reclaim. The water was cold when I tested it with my foot, and an oily sheen spread across the surface from my exposed leg. Whatever foulness my body had extruded was oily. The fish seemed to be repelled by my scent, suddenly stopping their trips to the surface. As I settled into the water, there did not appear to be any threat. "Mavith, why don't you check the chest in the center of the chamber while I clean up?" Surprisingly, the Goliath did not seem as excited about treasure as most people. He nodded, accepting the task reluctantly. I scrubbed myself as best I could in the water with a sock. With no detergent, it was difficult to clean off. Soon, The entire surface of the pool was covered in an oily film from my efforts. I scrubbed my skin raw, trying to free myself of the foul stench. While I was bathing, Mavith returned with 12 silver coins and a potion, handing them to me. I studied the runic script on the potion before announcing, as best as I can translate. It says see in the dark. This is a potion of night vision. Mavith looked impressed. Keep it, Mavith. Dungeon potions should be good for years. I sent the coins to my dimensional space so he would not have to carry them, and put the fishing kit on the shore for him. Mavith looked disgusted at the pond, which now had an oil slick coating it. Eric, I do not know if I want to fish this pond. I looked into the water and it seemed some of the fish were having trouble swimming. Whatever impurities had been released from my body had fouled and poisoned the water. Can you harvest the berries for me? I think they have a use. Mavith looked at the 24 coffee trees and nodded. He seemed happy to have an excuse to get away. I continued my efforts to get as clean as possible before dressing in clean clothes. A few fish bobbed on the surface, clearly dead. I tried the collector on 3 of the small fish, and only one yielded a minor essence of constitution. I handed it to Mavith before putting my armor back on. My Legion armor was in bad shape. The red lacquer on the metal helmet was chipped. The leather pieces soaked in resin had warped slightly. The armor even had gouges from the harpy's talons. It looked like whoever wore this suit had been through a lot. Poor guy had been frozen, burned, crushed, and clawed. I had a new set of Legion armor in my space, but I could not wear it without revealing my expansive space to the company. I helped Mavith fill a large tarp with the coffee berries before tying the corners together and sending it to storage. I had no idea how to turn the berries into actual coffee. But one thing we had plenty of in the dungeon was time. There were 2 exits from this room. The one to the left led to Flavius and our legionnaire companions. The one to the right was probably where the goblin had come from. I had to make a choice, reunite with Flavius and the others, or search for Castile. We still had hours before the harpies would respawn. I debated internally for a long time before announcing to Mavith, we're going that way. I pointed in the direction from which the goblin had most likely come. Mavith looked at the entrance that led to the legionnaires, then back at the one I had chosen. His confusion made me feel the need to explain myself. Flavius can't know that I have the collector, and the extent of my other abilities needs to remain a secret. Mavith understood. I will take your secret to my deathbed, Eric. His deep tone was reassuring. Though I was a little worried I said it too loudly, like he was making an oath, and I glanced at the corridor. Relieved no one was standing there. After I had voiced my decision, we did not waste much time, leaving the harpy room behind. As we went, the corridor curved left and right, but the familiar flowing lights on the ceiling and floor were reassuring. I wondered where the goblin had come from, and why nothing had pursued it from the room we approached. When we reached the end of the corridor, it opened into a wide, sandy room. Little dust devils of sand dotted the room. Maybe there's something underneath the sand. I gestured to Mavith on my right. Mavith was studying the sand as well. His deep voice speculated, there certainly are a lot of environments within this dungeon. I'd traveled through the scorching waste before. There were carnivorous beetles, scorpions of all sizes, and different varieties of elementals. Those sand swirls could be minor elementals. I studied the swirling clouds of sand more intently. They didn't seem to move, and I could recall no books that referenced elementals. If the goblin was able to pass through the room, should we try? Mavith looked behind us, probably considering the 5 legionnaires and the scholar back there. He eventually turned back to the sandscape. If they're elementals, they should be affected by our runic weapons, Mavith said. I took that as a yes and stepped out onto the sand. The chamber was sweltering hot, like I was in a scorching desert, and the sand eddies started moving toward me. Mavith stepped behind me. They are not elementals, Eric. Something is moving in the sand beneath them. Mavith was right. The sand formed mounds moving toward us. It was easy to get distracted by the mini tornadoes. They moved at a decent speed, spread out and coordinated. Back out of the room, Mavith. We both exited to the corridor's safety, ready to retreat to the harpy room. All 5 mounds converged on us and stopped at the entrance. A dog-sized beetle emerged from the sand, its impressive mandibles snapping in the air in frustration. It appeared uncertain about leaving the sand before submerging itself again. We both stood ready, but the beetles slowly moved away. Maveth's baritone sounded. I think they are sand scarabs. I have never seen them before. But sand scarabs use ether and earth magic to burrow in the sand. If you try to fight them, they can quickly sink you in the sand to attack you below the surface while you are immobilized. That sounds utterly horrific. Getting trapped in the sand, unable to put up resistance while they use those mandibles on your legs and other parts. I shivered, understanding why Flavius and the others had not tried this room. They're also fast, so it will be difficult to avoid them, Maveth noted. We do not need to avoid them, Maveth. They will not leave the protection of the sand. I stepped into the room and waited for the first scarab to reach me before pulling a deep column of sand under the vortex into my space. My ether bottomed out, and the beetle had resisted strongly, but I still succeeded. I stepped back into the corridor with Maveth. We were both ready as the other 4 scarabs hovered outside the corridor, but they were still unwilling to leave the sand's protection. I smiled at Maveth. Now we just have to wait until I can do that again. It usually takes me about 2 hours, but it has been less than an hour in the dungeon. I guessed it was not just the dungeon, but also the gains in my ether channeling attribute that were speeding my recovery. About 40 minutes later, a second scarab was killed. They traveled about a foot under the sand, but the swirling sand above them made it easy to track their movements. After killing a third one, the last 2 surprised us by leaving the safety of the sandy room. Maveth wasn't caught off guard, crushed one with his hammer, and I was able to pierce the other between the mandibles with my black blade. This was good, as I could use the collector on the last 2, getting a major earth essence from both. I tried the collector on the other 3 scarabs, getting 1 additional major earth essence and 1 minor earth essence. The first scarab had been dead for too long to yield anything. We knew the room was clear when the stone reward chest appeared in the center of the micro-desert. Easy peasy, Maveth. I smiled at the Goliath, who gave me a doubtful look as he tried to figure out what peasy meant. I approached the modest chest and shattered it. Silver coins spilled out, and a leather-bound tome lay on top. It smelled strongly of seasoned leather as I opened it. Inside were pages of layered spell forms for some type of spell. I could not understand what the spell actually did without the Latin script explaining it. After the first few pages of spell forms, the runic script on the following pages probably went into detail about the spell. But it would take me hours to puzzle out the translation in the dreamscape. I noted a few symbols that seemed to indicate it was related to the earth affinity. I held the book out to Maveth. I think it might be an earth affinity spell. Do you want it? No. I already inscribed my earth affinity, Eric, and I cannot learn actual spells. I shrugged and gathered up the silver coins along with the book. We looked around the room, seeing only sand filling the oval space. Let's move to the corridor, Maveth. This room wasn't very difficult for us, and I would not mind returning to get more earth essence later. We walked into the unexplored corridor, and it was not long before we arrived at a familiar-looking room with 2 long, wide stone shelves. Maveth grunted happily. A rest room? It was a safe room, unique in that there were 3 different exits, not including the corridor we were standing in, or the oily black door tempting us to exit the dungeon for good. We moved in and started to unpack, but I immediately noticed dark letters in Latin next to the faded elven script on the wall. Castile's group went this way, with an arrow pointing to one of the corridors. We were close, but how long ago had that been written? I turned to Maveth, who could not read Latin. Castile's group was here. His eyes went wide with excitement. He was clearly ready to get out of the dungeon. Don't get too excited. We don't know how long ago they passed through here. Why don't you get some sleep first? I'll stay up and prepare some food. I pulled out the elven tablet table and some ingredients, including a handful of coffee berries. Maveth made himself comfortable and was soon snoring. With Maveth asleep, I grasped the edges of the table and activated the device. It was time to see what the major illusion essence had done for me. I was looking forward to seeing my progress. I felt healthy and fully recovered after a week of full meals, and the ring of sustenance had slowly increased its effectiveness. I had not been training in my spare time, but I still felt like most of my strength and clarity of thought had returned. I was not expecting too many gains, as the period since my last reading was minimal. I was mostly focused on my illusion affinity. How much had it increased from just a single major essence? I reviewed the left side of the tablet first, moving my food prep items out of the way to read the results. My physical attributes had normalized to their relative levels before we were chased into the elven ruins and nearly starved inside the library. My mental attributes showed modest gains from a few essences. The magic attributes showed the most impressive gains, with channeling increasing by 6 points and ether tolerance by 3. I assumed this was due to the ley line being so close to the dungeon, and the faster rate at which I could recover my ether. With my channeling increasing, it meant I would see gains outside the dungeon, as well if I ever got outside of the dungeon. 2 glaring weaknesses stood out: my aether pool and my ability to shape ether. So far in this dungeon, I had not discovered any essences for either magic attribute. There wasn't much I could do about my poor luck, but I had enough essences to last me weeks. I moved everything to the other side of the table to read my magical affinities. The only change was with my illusion affinity. I had unlocked 3 points in the illusion affinity, raising it from 0 to 3 with a single major essence. It was not even remotely enough to gain a new spell form, and it was half as effective as the Apex Earth essence had been in awakening the affinity. Still, the awakening of the illusion affinity had been just as painful and unpleasant. I still smelled like dried vomit, even though I had left the soiled clothes behind. Sighing, I started to work on dinner, shaving bear meat with Maveva's new skinning knife. I could only take 1 essence a day without risking being overwhelmed. I had told Maveth and Rielia to do the same, but Castile had told me during my first dungeon delve that you only needed to wait an hour between consuming similar essences, though each successive one would be unpleasant as the body needed time to recover. Could I raise one of my magic affinities high enough to imprint a new spell form? If yes, should I pursue illusion or earth essence? I had 2 apex and 1 major essence of illusion remaining. For earth essences, I had 2 apex, 6 major, and 1 minor essence. There was also the possibility of getting more earth essences from the sand scarabs. I had books in my dimensional space with spell forms for both affinities. The meat started sizzling. I cooked it in small batches and sampled each one. The cooking was more for Maveth since I had the ring of sustenance. Maveth rolled over at the smell, facing me. Sleepily, he asked. Did it work? Did what work? I asked, feigning ignorance. You took out the tablet table, Eric. I know you do not want me to see your readings, but it is obvious you wanted to see if the suffering you went through was worth it. I had to remember that Maveth was not dumb, and that I was being very transparent. I admitted calmly. Yes, I awakened my illusion affinity. Do you want to try to awaken one of your affinities? Maveth sat up, his nose wrinkling at my lingering scent. No. His voice echoed in the room. I am happy with improving my physical prowess. How long was I asleep? More than 2 hours, less than 3. I did not have Maveth's uncanny ability to know how much time had passed. After you eat, you can go back to sleep. The ring has reduced my sleep to just 2 or 3 hours now. Although, I do want to use the amulet at some point. I started frying slices of purple potatoes in the remaining bear fat while Maveth quickly devoured 5 pounds of shaved bear meat. He had lost a lot of weight but was putting it back on quickly. It was awe-inspiring how much food he was able to consume. I drank water and popped a few slices of purple potato into my mouth. Even if I burned my mouth, I could heal the blisters easily enough. I was starting to use magic without even thinking about it. Finally satiated after eating 4 large potatoes after the bear meat, Maveth asked, Are we going to pursue Castile? Yes, but first I want to harvest the sand scarabs one more time, I admitted. I want to try and increase my earth affinity high enough to imprint a spell form for earth on my aether core. Maveth's eyes danced excitedly. That would be amazing, Eric. I would suggest my earth spell form, shape stone. It has been extremely valuable to me and would give us something in common. His green eyes sparkled eagerly. I will see when the time comes, Maveth. I still need to raise my earth affinity high enough to imprint a spell form. Maveth ate some appleberry jam before going back to sleep. I turned my attention to the coffee cherries. I was not a coffee addict, but I enjoyed a morning cup on the way to work a lifetime ago. I husked all the berries, giving me a handful of white, slimy beans. I took a moment to enter my dreamscape amulet and find the passage for kava, the dessert drink made from beans. Unfortunately, there were no recipes to follow. so I was winging it. I tried heating them in a pan. They smoked fiercely, but eventually browned. I ground the beans up and added boiling water once they were dried. I let the sediment settle and tried a sip. I spit out the bitter, grassy-tasting beverage. My heart thudded in my chest, and I felt the turmoil in my ether core. Thankfully, I hadn't swallowed the brew. These coffee beans contained raw aether. They were an alchemy ingredient, not a wake-me-up beverage. Mavith was still sleeping, and I did not disturb him while I cleaned up. I removed my armor and went through my sword forms. I was only mildly rusty. Even with consuming essences, I needed to start getting into the mindset of training, both in the dreamscape and outside of it. When Mavith stirred again, he rose to do his business in the corridor, and I set myself up for a nap with the amulet. As he returned, I channeled aether into the amulet. First, I confirmed in my dreamscape library that I had the book for earth spell forms. It was there, but I would wait to study it until my affinity reached a sufficient level. I opened the Scorpion Room and spent 3 hours practicing with Constantine, Xavier, and Mavith. It felt good to focus on fighting people instead of monsters. I also missed Constantine's repeat encouragement. Serana wanted to fight with me as well, but I declined her requests and let her play with Oscar, who was begging for attention as well. I sealed everyone in the Scorpion Room again, as we were getting close to finding Castile. I guessed she would want to use the amulet. On an impulse, I created a likeness of Raelia. She immediately rolled away, drawing her weapons, and started swearing. "Where am I? Who are these people?" She pointed at me. "Legionnaire, what treacherous space have you sent me to now?" She pointed her legacy blade threateningly at me. I had expected Raelia to react this way. Her form and personality were drawn from my subconscious. Mavith moved to calm down the agitated elf. With a smirk, I informed her, "Welcome to the dreamscape, Raelia. We can talk another time." "What is a dreamscape?" she started to say, but I was already exiting. I sat up and was disappointed that the sour, acidic bile smell still lingered on my body. Maybe I could use the mouthwash as a body wash to eliminate the smell. No, it was best to save the mouthwash. Mavith was rolling his essences in his hand, probably trying to decide which one to consume. "You can take another one, Mavith. Everyone is different in how long they have to wait between essences. If your stomach gets upset, you'll know your interval between consumption." What I told Mavith was the truth from my perspective. He took another quickness essence and put it in his mouth, savoring the effect. "Has it been a day since we killed the scarabs?" I asked Mavith. "No, Eric. There are still about 4 hours before a day has passed," Mavith grumbled. We walked back to the sand room and waited in the corridor. Mavith snacked while I studied the dead scarabs, waiting for the dungeon to absorb them. They disappeared in a blink and 2 small swirling sand funnels formed, followed by a third, a fourth, and a fifth. "Mavith, it's time." I stood and cracked my knuckles. It went the same way as last time. I killed 2 scarabs in the sand, but did so closer to the corridor. I removed the collector before the fight began, allowing me to use it on the sand scarabs between kills. When we finished, I took 2 major earth essences and 3 minor earth essences. The reward chest only held some large silver coins and non-runic ornate jewelry with some impressive emeralds. I now had a sizable collection of earth essences. Back in the safe room, I slowly placed one of the major earth essences in my mouth. Flashes of phantom pain made me hesitant to consume my second earth essence. This was another test. If I had truly unlocked the earth affinity, I shouldn't have to go through that pain again. The grainy earth essence dissolved in my mouth and was hard to swallow. My stomach suddenly cramped. "Shit," I said, and Mavith moved to steady me. I held up my hand to hold him back. "No, I am fine. Just an upset stomach. It's working normally." It took a few minutes before I felt the essence assimilate completely. The brief pain was perhaps because I had not waited long enough between essences, or maybe this was a sign that I was not fully healed from opening my illusion affinity. I needed to be mindful over the next few weeks. I used my healing spell form to try to detect any damage in my mana channels, but sensed nothing wrong, though perhaps my healing spell form could not detect issues with mana channels. I took out the tablet table and Mavith turned his back, making me feel guilty for not trusting him. I used the table, reset it, and returned it to my space. Okay, Mavith. Let's go find Castile. As we walked into the unknown corridor, I smirked. My earth affinity had increased from 6 to 8.